Welcome to your in-depth astrology overview and zodiac forecast for October 2024. I'm going to share some key details to look out for to begin with, but please stay with me. Then on screen I'll share the event chart right at the start of the month. We can all collectively relate to that. It is going to be influential in terms of providing a backdrop, but as events unfold, I'll go through each of those in precise detail to share with you. Then I'm going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. This month begins with a very powerful solar eclipse across the 2nd or 3rd of October, depending on where you live. But in the mix is the mercurial energies of the planet of communication, Mercury. That suggests if we can sharpen up our listening skills over the next 6 months, for all of us, there is an opportunity to improve the way we interact. But Venus, the planet which rules the sign of Libra, where the solar eclipse occurs, is also very influential this month. It starts the month in fine form, in a very stable link with Saturn, but it does run into some heavy weather at the heart of the month, and then as the month goes on, it is going to be in a more tense angle with Saturn. So we need to explore that too. Now, this is a month when Jupiter is going to go into its retrograde, which goes on through to the early part of February next year. But ironically, Pluto ends its retrograde. So we've got one starting, one ending. But we've also got the potential for some true fortune as the Sun forges a gorgeous link with Jupiter despite that retrograde. So I can't wait to share that with you. Now on the 17th we do have a very potent full moon. This full moon in the sign of Aries is afflicted by the ruler of the sign of Aries, Mars, which is in a sign that it's not at its best in the sign of Cancer. So that could rock things towards the centre and latter part of the month. Then as we move into the last 10 days, the Sun's going to be making its way into Scorpio, but getting into conflict with the ruler of Scorpio, the modern higher octave ruler of Pluto. So I need to share that with you too. So much to unpack, but also should just say at the very end of this month, the two rulers of Scorpio do go face to face. What's going to be the implications of that? I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now. Help the channel to thrive. Click on that sub button, but also the bell notification symbol. But there's another process that you need to do now in order to get the prompts from YouTube. I'm sharing that on screen for you. Take advantage, please, of my year 2025 personal horoscope offer. You can order now, get the rest of 24 free, but also my special package, Your Life Roadmap Report. The combination of all this energy will give you searing insights to guide your moves, and it's great value. If you prefer to have a one-to-one with me, please check out my testimonials below, and you can book a reading by clicking on the link. Also, if you'd like to get your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, please see the link below, and you can enjoy that from the perspective of your ascendant, the sun or the moon. So on the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the month, and as ever, we need to be mindful of the two luminaries. The sun is in the sign of Libra, and in fact, as September came to a close, we did have a Mercury cazimi, an electric energy which gives us an opportunity to cut through as the sun animates and warms up the sharpness of Mercury in a really positive way. So we're bringing that into this new month, and you can see Mercury still very close to the sun. So Mercury in Libra is asking us all to be conscious of being a bit more detached when it comes to relationships, because the lunar eclipse that occurred across the 17th and 18th of September, provided a backdrop energy for the following 6 months, was very close to Neptune. Neptune can be wonderful for heightening our senses, helping us to trip the light, fantastic, but of course it can also create confusion and distortion, and in the sign of Pisces, very much to do with our subconscious. So what Mercury can do as it applies to the Sun at the start of this month and into the solar eclipse is just help us to cut through, but also at the same time understand that our deeper motivations, if we're not so conscious of them, can interfere with the clarity around our relationships. But what about the Moon? Well, the Moon is in the sign of Virgo, and you can see it's not far off being in an opposition with Saturn in Pisces. So it's around about a 5 degree opposition. So we start this month with the Moon asking us to be very practical, to try to get the essential everyday parts of our world working well. But if we're almost being too conscientious, the energy of Saturn suggests that we could actually end up feeling quite worn out. So it's going to be important to prioritize the things that we grapple with at the start of this month in terms of our home and our emotional and even our family situations. Could be some old issues that just come up into the open, and maybe those old issues were also aroused by the energy of that lunar eclipse in Pisces, very close to Neptune. In fact, some people at the start of October could be feeling profoundly nostalgic for someone from their past. But we always need to be mindful of how or why that relationship may have broken down. But of course, we can be very thoughtful and think about people who are no longer with us as well. So the two luminaries, the Sun very close to Mercury, really urging us to grapple with our relationships in a clear way. The Moon's asking us to be virtuous at home, but Saturn's suggesting that we shouldn't overdo it. So that's the very start of this month. But of course, across the 2nd and the 3rd, we have the solar eclipse in Libra, an air sign, very much about balance, but also about equilibrium, but it's also a cardinal sign, so it has natural authority. But because Mercury is so closely enshrined in this early energy of the month, the next 6 months suggest we have a fantastic chance to try to celebrate the things we have in common. A lot of modern life seems to be about chaffing about points of difference. If we can actually appreciate that we do all have those commonalities, the better everything will be. And in fact, Venus, the planet of relating, although it is in the sign of Scorpio, where it is in detriment, forges a very solid link as we go into the first week of this month with Saturn. So the relationships that we can really count upon and have depth, Venus in Scorpio, and we also feel that there's a psychological security, Saturn, those kind of relationships can really get stronger right at the start of this month. But over the next 6 months, the opportunity also to try to understand more about what we need from our relationships, because the solar eclipse isn't just about, oh, we might meet someone who absolutely sweeps us off our feet. We all have relationships, and in many different ways. So it's not just in a romantic context, it's with ourselves. That's the most important relationship of all, with the folks next door, with our siblings, with our colleagues, our friends, as well as potentially in a relationship situation. So that's the opportunity that we have from that solar eclipse, which provides a backdrop of energy for the next half year. It's also the penultimate eclipse in the series between the signs of Libra and Aries. So when we have the Aries solar eclipse on the 29th of March next year, that will be the last one in this series. So the Aries energy has been asking us to stand in our power, but the Venus energy is asking us, despite that, to still try to find those connections and to create greater harmony and understanding, but also to retain an awareness of our need for boundaries. Relationships should never really be only one way. It is finding that midpoint which really works for both people. But on the 9th, Jupiter does go into a retrograde in the sign of Gemini, which of course is not its favourite location. It can make us very bubbly around communication, perhaps even very sociable, but at the same time it is detrimented. But it's going to be retracing its steps from 21 degrees right through to the early part of February next year. But Jupiter, despite this, does forge a glittering alliance with the Sun, and with the Sun in the Aries sign of Libra, relating, and Jupiter in the air sign of Gemini, quick communications. It's possible, despite the retrograde, we could still have a stroke of fortune if we stay open-minded about the type of person that we can link to. Then on the 12th, Pluto goes direct. We'll all take that. The mighty Pluto is going to be travelling back into the sign of Aquarius on the 19th of November. Pluto's stationing direct here gives us an opportunity in the interim to really grapple with anything to do with our life structures and our ambitions and our goals, Capricorn, but make it meaningful. But on the 13th, Mercury arrives in Scorpio. This is where Mercury dives deep. The conversations that Mercury's been having in Libra are delightful because, as we see at the start of this month, very close to the Sun because of that exact alignment at the end of September, the GEMINI. But now Mercury's not so interested in the conversation. It wants to know what the real meaning is. So it wants to decode. It wants to understand the subtext. So if you like, it's the cosmic detective turning up his collar and wanting to delve deep into what's really going on. But Mercury does clash. In fact, the clash starts from the 11th with Pluto through to the 14th. It's possible, therefore, that because Pluto's so late in Capricorn, we need to almost envision this as being in the earliest degree of Aquarius. It's possible, therefore, that Mercury going into the 8th house can make us much more conscious of where someone's being possessive or controlling or trying to leverage something upon us, but particularly to do with our future. Now on the 17th, this is a mighty full moon. Full moon in Aries is an interesting one because the Sun in the sign of Libra is not at its strongest. So essentially, the Sun in Libra is in its full. So obviously the Sun in Aquarius is in detriment, but here in Libra, perhaps the desire of Libra to relate and collaborate doesn't quite work with that thrusting drive of the energy of Aries, which is all about getting things off the ground, being very single-minded and not being so focused on how other people feel. But for us all, if there is a weak relationship, particularly in an emotional context, the fact that the ruler of Aries, Mars, is in a T-square with this event means this is one of the most potent Aries full moons you could possibly imagine, because Mars isn't that happy in Cancer. It's in its full. So people could be very reactive. And one of the areas that they could be reactive about is that if we've really tried with the solar eclipse to reach out to people, find those points of agreement, try to cooperate, try to see both sides of the story, and someone's been very resistant to it, a lot of frustration could boil out into the open from the 17th onwards. But on the 17th as well, Venus moves into the sign of Sagittarius. Now Venus in Sagittarius is very much about knowledge, but it can also be linked to travel. If you are someone who's lucky enough to be heading off for a break somewhere, the chances are you can immerse yourself in the culture, the historical parts of that journey in a really important way. But if you're nearer to home, you may find yourself checking out art galleries, going to watch a band or the theatre, and just really expanding your appreciation of anything to do with the arts. But also, Venus in the 9th house gives us a desire to unlock the truth around relationships. The problem is that Venus in the last week of this month comes into a crunching right angle with Saturn. But I just need to tell you about Venus going face to face with Uranus, because that occurs from the 12th through to the 17th, and that can create some sudden attractions, but also the need for some sudden escapes around relationships. So by the time we get to Venus squaring up with Saturn and Venus moving into Sagittarius, needing to understand the truth of a certain relationship is going to become very compelling indeed. But then on the 22nd, the Sun moves to join up with Mercury and powers into Scorpio for the first time in 11 months. But it too clashes with Pluto. And interestingly, in the last week of this month, as I mentioned in the introduction, Mars and Pluto, the two rulers, the co-regents of the sign of Scorpio, are also going face to face. We've seen a lot of forceful actions on the global stage in the last few years. And if ever there was a time for some kind of pushback on some of those, it could be towards the end of this week, to be honest. However, the Sun moving into Scorpio does have great strengths if we're prepared to go with the flow, despite the square with Pluto. It's all about being open to the concept of transformation. Maybe some of us find it a little bit difficult to know that life is a journey which has a beginning but also an end. But within that journey we can go through a series of ends and beginnings. If you're quite sanguine and philosophical about that, something important to you can transform in the last 10 days of this month. But if you're holding on to something or taking a very unbending position, it could lead to some very strident disagreements at the end of this month, to be honest. And it's important, therefore, particularly with the Sun being in a fixed sign in Scorpio, to try to let things flow and to just go with that flow, because just digging our heels in isn't necessarily going to be particularly helpful. So as we come to the end of the month, there is the potential for some entrenched opinions or interactions. We may also see in our personal situations, if there is someone, say in our family life, who tends to be quite dominant and likes to always get their own way, that person could be held much more to account. But we could see that in public life as well. And Mars in the 4th house in Cancer is an interesting one, because Cancer will usually do anything to avoid an outright confrontation. But what can happen with Mars is once something really rouses things up, the Cancer crab with Mars's support can suddenly launch forwards and land a very big pinch with those crab pincers. So there could be something that happens towards the end of this month when there's a more reactive energy. But to be honest, that could flow on from the full moon right at the heart of the month on the 17th. So this is a month which starts off with a glorious opportunity to work on our relationships through the solar eclipse and Mercury being in the mix, but also because Venus is in a very stable link with Saturn at the start of this month. Those really positive relationships can just get stronger. But with Jupiter going retrograde, despite that, there is the chance for some glorious interactions at the heart of the month. But if there is someone we encounter with Venus going opposite Uranus, whether it would be a long-standing relationship or something of a brief encounter is another matter. But there could be quarrels around money at the heart of this month. And then later in the month with the full moon, I feel that any weak relationship really can come under the astral microscope. But Venus moving into Sagittarius asks us to find out the truth of our relationships. Its clash with Saturn in the last week suggests some old issues could come up into the open. And also the Sun moving into Scorpio along with Mercury is asking us to try to digest and reflect on some of the conversations earlier in the month and try to make sense of what they mean. But if there is someone who always seems to have the nap hand, the end of the month could see some pushback against that person, but also I feel on the global stage. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can reflect to in terms of your ascendant, sun or moon. Welcome Aries to your in-depth monthly forecast for October 2024 for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. Please do take advantage of your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data. If you order it now, you can get the rest of year 2024 free, plus your life roadmap report and 30% off. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the month. We need to be mindful of the luminaries, but also your ruler Mars. Mars starts this month in the sign of Cancer, where it's going to be through to the 4th of November. But for you, the 4th house position for Mars can pose a little bit of a challenge, particularly through the full moon in your sign on the 17th. And the reason for that, Aries, is that you're very much an instinctive person. When you get that sense inside of you to take action and to thrust forwards, that's when you're at your absolute best. But having Mars in your 4th house is a very emotional sector, and it could see you deflected in some ways by the needs and the situation concerning where you live or the people immediately around you. But in terms of the moon, it is in a very practical area for you, and that has its strengths, but that faces off with Saturn at the start of this month, so you may need to prioritize, again, perhaps to do with the home and family, and there could be some old issues that are washing around that need to be digested and perhaps dealt with as well. But in terms of the Sun, it's a great start to the month. It's forging a very close alliance with Mercury, which actually peaked on the last day of September with the GEMINI. So as you go into this month, the theme to begin with is very much about relationships. But what about relationships? For some people are quite happily single. Other people may be in a relationship that means a lot to them, but maybe it's not running quite as sweetly as they would like. Other people may be fabulously happy, or other people's connections to others may be more meaningful around friendships, people that they have to work with, and so on. So relationships has a different meaning for many of us. But the great thing about the solar eclipse, which is across the 2nd or 3rd, is that whatever you want from your life in terms of your connection to others over the next 6 months, you have a delicious opportunity to embrace this eclipse, because it's not going to be occurring again in Libra for some time. The key, however, is the lunar eclipse, which occurred across the 17th and 18th of September, is still creating the potential for some confusion, or for some deeper issues to be just washing around, perhaps in a less than conscious way. So if there is some confusion around a relationship, Mercury being so close to the Sun at the start of this month is asking you to take a step back, to perhaps even talk to someone who may have an outside perspective on your situation, maybe even get some professional advice. And Mercury being aligned to the solar eclipse suggests that over the next half year you could encounter someone who actually can be a real asset to you, because they don't necessarily have the buy-in to your emotional situation, and therefore they can be that much more detached. So see that as a potential positive part of this month's start. But Venus, the planet of relating, is going to be connecting with Saturn through the first week. If you're someone who is very devoted and it's really going well, that particular aspect is a really great one to have. But equally, Venus in the 8th house can be very much to do with shared finance. And also, if you're an entrepreneurial person, the energy at the start of this month suggests trying to find collaborations. They don't have to be outright partnerships. It could be you could share an office with someone who has another small business. It could be that you could swap some skills in order to help your enterprise move forwards. It may be that you could become part of some kind of organisation where there's shared resources and encouragement. So that way of working forwards can definitely be an asset for you this month. But on the 9th, Jupiter, the planet of fortune, does go into its annual 4-month retrograde. When Jupiter goes retrograde, it's asking us to think more about the philosophical side of its energy rather than the luck side. And also because in Gemini, it's not its absolutely blindingly best location. It's just saying to you, because for you it's in your third house, which is quick communication. If there is knowledge that you need to gain, the third house, or there's knowledge you can share with others, the retrograde through to the early part of February next year can actually be a real asset, another asset to you, if you don't expect instant results. Because that's one of the problems with Jupiter, is the expectation. There are people who talk about Jupiter as being this amazing gift that we get once every 12 years in each part of the zodiac. And it can be, but we have to put the application and the perspiration in order to get the rewards. But I will say to you that at the heart of this month, on the 14th, there could be a meeting that you have or a conversation, despite Jupiter's retrograde, which could prove outright lucky. So do stay mindful of that. I do feel, however, from the 12th through to the 17th, there could be some unexpected expenses that come up for you, or perhaps that more impulsive part of your nature will get the upper hand. If you see something that proves to be somewhat irresistible, it may be that you'll just need to have it. But you could also find around any kind of diet plan that your resistance can be low as well. But on the 12th, Pluto ends its retrograde. Now, Pluto went into retrograde in May, and it's going to return back into the sign of Aquarius on the 19th of November, which for you is about friendship, your long-term plan, your direction of travel, but also your higher values. If your professional situation is uncertain at the current time, even more reason to try to build those collaborative links. Even if you're not necessarily getting a gig with someone that you're talking to, it may be that in time they will tell someone else about what you have to offer. But if you do feel that your professional or worldly interactions are a bit fluid, it's understandable if you did feel a little bit worried. But that opposition between Venus and Uranus at the heart of this month is also telling you to stay open-minded about resources. And sometimes opportunities can happen, particularly with Uranus, very, very rapidly, and we have to almost be ready to seize them. If you're not, it could something could develop, and then before you've really responded, it could be gone. So whether it's in a romantic context, a business or a financial one, expect something electric to happen at the heart of this month. But because the Sun forges an exact trine with Jupiter on the 14th, that could turn out to be a key date. But just before then, on the 13th, Mercury returns to Scorpio. But it does clash with Pluto, just as it does. Despite the conversations you may be having in the early part of this month, sometimes in life people want something in order to give something, so there is some leverage. Unfortunately, that's one of life's realities. So there may be an opportunity financially or professionally that you're offered, but it may not be exactly what you want. If things at any or in any strand of your life feel somewhat frustrating, the full moon in your sign on the 17th is likely to bring that energy to the surface, because Mars, your ruler, is going to be in a T-square with the full moon. So the position of the moon in your sign, the Sun's in Libra, and T-square in them is Mars. So Mars in Cancer is in its full. As I mentioned before, it can be emotional, can be a bit reactive, and if you don't feel heard, and that's perhaps possible on this full moon, if you don't feel respected, it could even be the kids, if they're not really taking enough note of what you're saying or pitching in on the domestic sphere. That's the type of stuff that could see you be much more likely to ignite with frustration because of Mars forging the square with the full moon in your sign. Now on the 17th too, however, Venus does move into Sagittarius. If you are someone who enjoys travel, or you enjoys different interests, or you have connections with people overseas, or you're someone who's interested in philosophy, or you want to join in with some evening classes to expand your knowledge in some ways, Venus moving into this area is delicious. If you've yet to book that vacation, a great time to do it. But on the 22nd, the Sun joins up with Mercury in Scorpio, but also clashes with Pluto. So if you do have a role where you feel that you're locked in some ways, perhaps because of the finance, but it's not really the type of role that you would really like, all that can create a huge amount of frustration before the end of this month. So particularly if you feel that someone's not being very honest. So a lack of honesty in any kind of relationship could be quite triggering for you towards the end of this month, whether it's with someone at home, emotionally, in your family, or professionally. And the tension that can build up towards the end of October could be absolutely palpable. But I rest my case on that solar eclipse. It's about application and perspiration, particularly as the Sun links with Jupiter at the heart of this month. So if you do feel that you're up against it towards the end of this month, try to keep the lines of communication open, whether it's in romance, whether it's with family members, professionally, friendships. If you're not really feeling heard, the potential for you to boil over with frustration is enormous. So always staying mindful of why someone's responding in the way they are, perhaps of their particular circumstances. Doesn't mean to say you shouldn't be cross, angry or annoyed, but if you can just factor in why someone is responding like they are, that can actually bring a much greater sense of perspective. And that's really what that solar eclipse is offering you at the start of this month through the next 6 months. So despite it being quite a challenging and aggravating Aries full moon at the heart of this month, try to go back to the energy of that solar eclipse to guide you, because it can bring opportunities to build new alliances, improve the ones you've got, but you will have to marshal some short-term frustration this month. Have a great month, Aries. All the best and goodbye. And do please check out that year 2025 personal horoscope forecast offer. You'll get the rest of this year free, but also 30% off with your life roadmap report, all based totally on your unique birth data, and great value too. Please see the link below for more. Welcome Taurus, your in-depth monthly forecast for October 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. Please do take advantage of your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data. If you order it now, you can get the rest of year 2024 free, plus your life roadmap report and 30% off. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the month. As ever, we need to be mindful of the luminaries. The Sun for you is in house 6, innately practical, and the Moon in house 5, which can be very affectionate, warm and fun. But we also need to be mindful of the position of your ruler Venus, and it is in your opposite sign, which is really exciting. And if there is someone you're connecting well with, particularly in your friendship circle in the early part of this month, the connection, and it could be with a colleague, can get stronger as Venus aligns so constructively with Saturn, which can be about substance. However, the position of the Moon right at the start of this month does go face to face with Saturn, and I feel that that old saying, if you can't please all of the people all of the time, does come up for me a little bit for you, because there is going to be part of your situation which you're going to need to grapple with, which perhaps is a little bit unsexy, and someone may be a bit disappointed about that. So as much as there is the potential for that warm and deepening link, you're going to, through the solar eclipse, have an opportunity over the next 6 months to really get certain strands in your world working much more efficiently. And with Mercury in the mix as well, using your mind, technology, your communication skills is going to be important to this. The sixth house can be about work, it can be about our sacrifices, it can be about where we need to make some precise but important, sometimes small, but changes that eventually add up to something more substantive. For example, if you are in a role which is not giving you much stimulation or satisfaction, you may look to change your job over the next half year, particularly because the lunar eclipse across the 17th and 18th of September, depending on where you are, was accenting your future but also your idealism. So to make that idealism work around the practical solar eclipse, there may be some things that you have to perhaps flex on. It may not be exactly what you need, but at the same time, if you're doing something, working hard and feel totally unfulfilled, you may find yourself really becoming much more aware of seeking down a new opportunity. Now, the sixth house undoubtedly can be about well-being, particularly around what we can do, where we can be more virtuous. The eighth house, which is more of a Scorpio energy, is much more to do with outright health. But I feel for you, I feel that this sixth house opportunity, particularly with Mercury there, could see you gaining a lot of knowledge. Even if you have a particular appreciation of nutrition and home cooking, you may find that that knowledge really expands over the next half year. So an exciting start to the month for sure. But on the 9th, Jupiter, the planet of fortune, and in your sector of everyday money, which has brought the potential for some opportunities since the start of, or the end of May, that does go into its 4-month retrograde. But this is something that happens every single year. And indeed, at the heart of this month on the 14th, despite the retrograde, Jupiter still forges a very constructive link to the Sun in that practical 6th house. So if you are someone who can use your resources more effectively, one of the things that Jupiter can do is trick us into thinking that everything's going to be amazing, but we have to put the graft in order to get the reward. So Jupiter going retrograde in some ways could make you think more deeply about resources, but also about your values. And maybe that also feeds into the solar eclipse opportunity. Where do you feel that you can give your time and energy, the energy of the solar eclipse, in a way which feels meaningful for you, Jupiter in its retrograde? So you can work those energies together. Now on the 12th, Pluto goes direct. It went retrograde on the 11th of May. And the opportunity for you, now it's back in Capricorn, is to gain more knowledge through to when it moves back to Aquarius on the 19th of November. But knowledge comes in many different guises. It can come from an informal chat with a friend who just has a lot of experience in a particular area, can come from doing a formal course, going to college, or it can come from what we read and absorb online. But Pluto going direct in your 9th house certainly encourages you to reflect on just how much information and knowledge you've gained since 2008. And I think it's been a lot. And I think a lot of that knowledge has been life knowledge, but particularly through travel and experimentation in various ways. But at the heart of this month, Venus, your ruler, does go opposite Uranus. If you're single, this could see you encounter someone who really makes your heart race. But will this person be a person that you can really rely upon for the long term? I think you're going to start to find that out, the answer to that question, from the 13th and the 22nd, when Mercury and the Sun move into your opposite sign. It's certainly possible, but the way you connect to this person could occur in a very fast and unexpected way, which in itself can be very stimulating. But you know, the converse can be true. If you're in a relationship which is not really giving you all that you need, and perhaps you're staying in it because of the inherent stability that it provides, but it's not really making you feel alive, the opposition between Venus and Uranus is asking you to rethink, do you really need to stay in this relationship? The thing is, once Mercury and the Sun move on the 13th and 22nd respectively, they both square up to Pluto. So it's possible, if we imagine Pluto so late in Capricorn, the square actually occurs as if Pluto was in Aquarius, which for you is your connection to the world. So it's possible that maybe your connection to the world is informing, for example, perhaps work or where you live. The 10th house can be about property. Maybe that's feeding into the decisions that you've been making around relationships, or one in particular. So the opposition between Venus and Uranus challenges all of that and asks you to ask yourself some very searching questions about whether you're in the most authentic relationship for you. It's not that you're being dishonest or the other person is, but we're all evolving, and you just need to ask yourself that honest question, because at the heart of this month, on the 17th, there is a very potentially turbulent full moon. For you, it occurs in your 12th house, which can be the part of life that we're reluctant, all of us are reluctant to look at. It can be to do with our fears, our anxieties, our subconscious, the painful elements of our past. On the other side of the heavens is the sun in the more practical area, but it's possible in terms of our professional situation, for example, that something could come into the open, because the 12th house can, in traditional astrology, be where we have hidden enemies. But also it can be where we kind of know that people aren't necessarily our greatest fans, but because Mars is intersecting this particular event in a very exact way, Mars for you is in your 3rd house, which can make you much blunter, much more to the point, and certainly is likely through to the 4th of November and from the 6th of January to the 18th of April next year. So you'd be much more outspoken in terms of representing how you feel, but also how you think about things. So therefore your ideas, but also your belief systems. So if you do suddenly find that something's out of kilter, or people are bringing issues up that are from the past, the chances are you're going to fire back in quite an assertive way. The interesting thing on the 17th too, however, is that your ruler dives deep, goes into your 8th house. This has a twin potential, perhaps even a triple potential. The first is that it can deepen a relationship which is going well. The second is that it can make us be much more mindful of the lack of intimacy in a relationship which isn't going well. The third thing is it's good for business, but we can also benefit from the generosity or the good fortune of someone we're closely aligned to. But you have a particular earthy sensual appreciation, and I think if you are connected to someone and it's going well, the chances are the intimacy between you can really step up at this part in the month, particularly with the Sun and Mercury moving, with the Sun on the 22nd into your sector of relating. But if there are any power issues around any relationship, be it with colleagues, a boss, line manager, someone who works for you, family member or a partner, they could explode into the open in the second half of this month. But what people could be surprised about is that you're not going to receive other people's viewpoints without standing your ground. And in the last week of this month, you could find yourself being extremely militant as Mars goes opposite Pluto across your 3rd and 9th house axis, which is about ideas, communication, but in the case of Pluto, your higher beliefs, but also your ruler is challenged by Saturn. And if there is someone who you feel is being jealous and controlling and limiting from your need to manifest what you need as an individual, you're just not going to have it, Taurus, which is brilliant. So you're going to find yourself being much more outspoken as this month draws to a close, in standing up what you need from all sorts of interactions. But at the start of the month and over the next 6 months, I feel the basic structure of your life is set to go through some kind of big reorganization, but at the end of it, it will be better defined and better for you, because I feel that you will be guided towards making the changes that are needed. Have a great month, Taurus, and do please check out that year 2025 personal horoscope forecast offer. You'll get the rest of this year free, but also 30% off with your life roadmap report, all based totally on your unique birth data and great value too. Please see the link below for more. Welcome Gemini to your in-depth monthly horoscope for October 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. Please do take advantage of your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data. If you order it now, you can get the rest of year 2024 free, plus your life roadmap report and 30% off. As last month came to a close, your ruler Mercury merged with the Sun, a GEMINI. That creates a dazzling uplift. The radiance of the Sun links with Mercury and amplifies its benefits. And as you come into October, showing on the screen now your event chart, you can see your ruler Mercury is still nestled very close to the Sun. So as you come into October, the chance to sparkle in terms of your creativity, the things you really enjoy, your sense of humour, even your sense of mischief in your 5th solar house are all going to be showcased as you make your way into the new month. We also need to be mindful, of course, of the position of the Moon. And ironically, that is in the 4th house, very much more to do with your home environment, and it is being checked by Saturn. So if there is something around the family situation, perhaps some demands and responsibilities, which could potentially cramp your style when it comes to your social interactions, that could feel a little bit challenging. However, as you make your way into the month, Venus, the planet of values, but also of money and relating, is for you in the part of your situation to do with practicalities. But Venus here suggests if you can be thoughtful in your approach to your interactions with others, particularly in a romantic context, but even at work, because Venus forges a very solid link with Saturn across the first week of this month. So your people skills, plus that sense of humour and fun, can also be helpful to build some good vibes as you enter the month. Now, of course, Jupiter, the planet of growth, optimism and fortune, has been with you since late May, and it is going to crystallise into a gorgeous alliance with the Sun right at the heart of this month, suggesting that if you are wanting to do something that's more daring, very much to do with expressing your personal talents and individual tastes, that's a wonderful combination. But we can't disguise the fact that Jupiter is going to be going into its annual 4-month retrograde from the 9th of the month, which goes on through to early February. This begins at 21 degrees. Now, the thing with Jupiter in Gemini is it's not its favourite location, and one of the things with Jupiter in terms of its weaknesses, it can kid us into believing that everything will turn out fabulously well, but we do need to put the effort in. So when it starts the cycle in our own sign, that's the beginning of a 12-year pattern. So if you have been working on something that is to do with your self-expression, this retrograde doesn't mean to say you're suddenly going to become unlucky. It's just that things could slow down a little bit, and you may need to look a little bit more inward for the answers, because Jupiter is the planet of philosophy, but also of faith. But that link on the 14th of this month, I can't stress it enough. It's one of astrology's most fortunate. So don't be swayed by the fact that Jupiter does go into the retrograde. But of course, at the start of this month, we also have that fabulous solar eclipse, the penultimate in the series between the signs of Libra and Aries. And because Mercury is so close by, using your mind, but also linking that to your passion, the 5th house, and the things you enjoy, can be a critical opportunity over the next 6 months. But the lunar eclipse, which occurred in the middle of September, is still active too, and that could have created some confusion or uncertainty about your direction of travel in terms of your professional hopes, goals and ambitions. But I feel that what the solar eclipse is saying to you is it's vital that you maintain your sense of self-confidence. And even if there is some uncertainty around some of your interactions in terms of your worldly connections, keep going with what you believe is right for you. It's just be aware that with the energy, including Saturn in your 10th house, whatever you want to do as an individual needs to in some ways meld into other people's expectations, because that's what the 10th house is about. It's very much about organisations, can be the way things have been done more traditionally. So you may just need to be conscious of that, but it doesn't mean to say you shouldn't still put lots of thrust in to what's important to you. Now, from the 11th through to the 14th, your ruler does go into a square with Pluto. This is one of those aspects where if we get caught up in being rather invested in our ideas to the degree that we're very attached to them, it can create some problems. In fact, Mercury is going to be moving at the heart of this month into a very precise area, and the clash therefore with the position of Pluto could be about shared resources, could be about what you're most invested in, and it's going to be important therefore to try to keep a sense of separation in some ways, because what can happen with Pluto and Mercury aspects is people can become quite belligerent. Ironically, on the 12th, Pluto ends its retrograde. I do feel that once it returns to Aquarius on the 19th of November, I feel that you will get some uplift from that. In fact, at the heart of this month, there could be some uncertainty about a relationship as Uranus goes opposite Venus. Something that hasn't been spoken about, that perhaps needed to be ventilated and aired, could come into the open. And all of that really can reach a peak when we have the full moon on the 17th. It's a very powerful full moon. For you, it's in the part of your situation to do with your future, but also your friendships and your connections. And that obviously is opposed by the Sun in the very warm and affectionate and self-expressive 5th house. That old saying, if we can't please all of the people all of the time, comes to mind. But this particular lunation squares up with Mars in your 2nd house of home and values. Your future direction could see you asking some questions about where you live, but also if there are some friendships or associations showing up in your world at that part of the month where you feel that people don't really recognise what you stand for, haven't got the respect that you really want them to have for you, could even be in a romantic context, that is something you're going to have to consider. Ironically, on the same day, Venus moves into a very harmonizing part of your chart, but in the last week of this month, despite your best efforts to reach out and connect and mediate with someone in the professional sphere, as Venus squares up with Saturn, your goodwill and your pleasantries could seem to not really receive much response, so that can be frustrating. But on the 22nd, the Sun follows Mercury, your ruler, which moved on the 13th into Scorpio, and the Sun follows suit. And again, that's very much about those practicalities. But again, there's a square with Pluto. Because Pluto's so late in the sky, in the sign of Capricorn, this essentially is a 6-9 square. One of the things about 6-9 is we can promise more than is realistically deliverable, or we could feel that responsibilities and obligations, the 6th house, are closing in on our need for independence and freedom. Now, as this month comes to a close, Mars and Pluto are going to go into a very strident opposition. If you are wanting to push forwards with a financial plan and you're really clear on your strategy, your determination to achieve your goals is going to be absolutely breathtaking, and your willpower can be absolutely maxed out. There could also be someone romantically that you find to be totally irresistible, and if it is someone that you find yourself being more and more smitten with, it could almost become something that dominates your thinking. So sometimes if we really like someone, of course, we do get very connected to their persona, and that may be something that keeps spinning around in our minds. But what can be a little bit more challenging is that there could be a hint of obsession at the end of this month, but that obsession could come from someone else, and you could be the person that they're drawn to. So that's interesting, particularly even if Venus is clashing with Saturn in terms of your professional relationships, it still continues in your sector of relating in a very harmonizing way in your more individual connections as this month draws to a close. So to recap, Gemini, this is a month which gives you a fabulous opportunity to showcase your talents. But if you're wanting to make big changes in terms of your worldly interactions, goals and ambitions, you may just need to be conscious of what other people expect from you. Jupiter, the planet of fortune, which is going to be with you through to June the 9th, 2025, does go into a retrograde, but it does forge a very lucky alliance with the Sun at the heart of this month. Communications will need some care this month. There could be at times when things get a bit tense, brittle, or even fraught. However, the full moon on the 17th is really pushing you to be clear about what you want in terms of marshalling your time and who you're going to spend time with. And also, you may find yourself strongly drawn towards someone towards the end of this month. And it could be that that person reciprocates that interest. And if they do, it could be a very hot encounter indeed. Have a great month, Gemini. And do please check out that year 2025 personal horoscope forecast offer. You'll get the rest of this year free, but also 30% off with your life roadmap report, all based totally on your unique birth data, and great value too. Please see the link below for more. Welcome Cancer to your in-depth monthly horoscope for October 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. Please do take advantage of your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data. If you order it now, you can get the rest of year 2024 free, plus your life roadmap report and 30% off. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the month, which always proves very influential. We need to be mindful of your ruler, the moon. It's in the sign of Virgo, which for you is about quick communication. The sign of Virgo, the host, about precision. The problem is that Saturn on the other side of the heavens is broadly opposite the moon. You may find at some point this month that however much you're trying to connect to someone else or communicate with their needs in mind, they're not quite as impressed as you might like. So just be aware that Saturn can bring a little bit of a cooling breeze to communications. But in terms of the solar eclipse, which occurs across the 2nd or 3rd of the month, depending on where you live, it's very close to Mercury. And in fact, as September came to a close, you may have had some sparkling ideas about what you wanted to do with where you live. And those ideas don't necessarily have to play out this month, because the solar eclipse provides a backdrop energy for the next half year. It's just that the lunar eclipse in September was really pushing you to expand your world, very much to do with travel, adventure, information, education or philosophy. And yet this homey influence, which is very much in keeping with your core nature, is what dominates in terms of the solar eclipse. Which of those two eclipses will get the upper hand, or can you weave them together? For example, if you are thinking about relocating your home base to somewhere completely different that really fits your needs, that would be a great way to surf the combination. But clearly with Mercury so close to the Sun, it's possible that anything to do with a home-based business, the technological side of your situation, or your communication with family members can be an important part of this month's story. But I take you back to that moon opposition with Saturn. So it is going to be important, despite that Mercury combination with the solar eclipse, and you thinking about where you live, how you live there, and who with, and there is the potential for some breakthroughs in terms of renovations or finding the home you really want. It is still going to be important to understand that not everybody may seem to be quite as enthusiastic about your plans as you would like. But as this month begins, Cancer, Venus is in a sparkling location for you. The fifth house is going to become busy for you this month. Mercury and the Sun are moving there. And the fifth house is where we can be more outgoing, more playful, and more sociable. So that's something to really look forwards to. And Venus does forge, ironically, a very constructive link with Saturn through the first week of this month. I feel if you do need to have a heart-to-heart with someone, and there is going to be some important issues discussed, the chances are you can express your ideas in a way which is both sincere and meaningful, but also help to get across why you may be developing a particular plan, particularly if you are wanting to change something around your life. But on the 9th, Jupiter, the planet of growth, optimism and fortune, does go into its annual 4-month retrograde. Now, until Jupiter enters your sign on the 9th of June 2025, it is going through your 12th house. 12th house energy can be to do with deep spiritual healing. It can be to do with the spiritual domain, and the sign of Gemini is one that's very much to do with quick communications. Things could slow down therefore with Jupiter retrograde here, but it also gives you an opportunity to check out some of your beliefs, which is what Jupiter influences as well. But the 12th house in traditional astrology can be about those people who don't have our best interests at heart, those hidden enemies. And Jupiter can be about the way that philosophies can be expressed, but sometimes dogmas. So you may find yourself through to the early part of February next year rethinking some of your philosophies, or reading some books or watching videos online that help to expand your outlook in some very deep and meaningful ways. Now, right at the heart of this month, we do have a lot of action. Pluto ends its retrograde, which began in May, but initially it still retains its status in your 7th house of relating. If we think about the big picture back to 2008 when Pluto first went there, there probably has been some significant entries, but also levers in terms of your relationships. Pluto can be about power, but it's also the planet of consequences. So it's not just about how other people are to us, it's also about how we are to them. And through to the 19th of November, when Pluto does re-enter your 8th house, it is going to be important to keep working at understanding the politics of your interactions, because Cancer, you can be a very powerful sign. You are a cardinal sign. That means you have executive leadership skills, and to be honest, Cancer is a brilliant, often marvelous manager of people. But in terms of your boundaries, that's what Pluto's asking you to think about here. And interestingly, Venus, despite being in that very sociable, even romantic part of your chart at the start of the month, does go into an opposition with the potentially erratic energies of Uranus from the 12th through to the 17th. Now, on the 14th, they're going to be exact. If you're single, that could bring someone into your world very, very suddenly, who you could find to be very interesting indeed. Whether this person would turn out to be someone that you would have a brief fling with, or someone who'd stick around for a longer association, really depends on you and your unique situation. However, in an existing relationship, it's an aspect which can create some restlessness, but also a need for excitement. So because Pluto goes direct in your sector of relating, if something has been a bit stuck, particularly since the 2nd of September, when Pluto inverted back into Capricorn and your 7th house, this is an opportunity for you to reimagine how you can connect with your partner, loved one, the friends that you have that bring the greatest amount of uplift to your world. But on the 13th, Mercury moves into the sign of Scorpio. For you, the 5th house is where Mercury is much more playful, can even be a bit mischievous. Your sense of humour can seem to come back to life, but it is clashing immediately with Pluto. And the reason for this is Pluto is so late in Capricorn, we can almost imagine it being in Aquarius. So for you, this is almost like a 5th, 8th house aspect. So when it comes to relationships, especially with Venus and Uranus in that opposition, if you are actually feeling quite penned in, and someone seems to be very much wanting to control your interests, your friendships, your time, that could see you very rebellious at that particular point. Now, if you cast your mind back to mid-July 2023, the North Node, the point of destiny for you, inverted into your sector of success. We've also had the solar eclipse this year that's been reinforcing that push to raise your profile and be much more ambitious and single-minded about what you want to get from situations. But on the 17th, the Aries full moon may give you the opportunity to push on with that, but it is squaring up with Mars in your sign. That's a mighty T-square between the position of the Sun and the Moon. So the Sun's in your 4th house of home, emotion, family, reflected by the solar eclipse at the start of the month, but the Moon in the 10th house. When the Moon's in the 10th house, it's very, very difficult to disguise how we feel. Even if you are someone who has a preference for keeping things a little bit more confidential. So if you have got some bubbling frustrations going on, particularly in terms of your work-life balance, you may find it much more difficult to contain those frustrations over the following 2 weeks. On the 17th, Venus moves into the sign of Sagittarius. Venus here is a bit of a truth seeker, but it also can give us an appreciation of links with overseas, travel, and if you are heading off on a holiday, it could turn out to be very restorative for you, certainly initially. It's just that the problem is that as Venus moves forwards, it does clash with Saturn in the last week of this month. And it's possible that you may feel a bit oppressed if your need for freedom and space is conflicted in some ways by another person or people's demand for you to produce something for them. So that can also create some frustrations. On the 22nd, the Sun moves into your sister water sign of Scorpio. It's a great place for the Sun to be for you personally, but again, like Mercury, it squares with Pluto, and we need to think about that 5-8 angle again. So if you are feeling a bit hemmed in, particularly around a relationship, Venus's opposition with Uranus, Pluto going direct, and Pluto squaring with Mercury and the Sun suggest that some politics that have been simmering beneath the surface may need to come up and really be explored. And all of it can happen in the last week of this month. This is when your cardinality, your leadership qualities can really be emphasized. Because although Pluto going direct is asking you to think about the politics of your relationship since 2008, when it first went into Capricorn, as Mars goes opposite Pluto in the last week, if you are still feeling a sense of injustice about anything, you may find that a part of your nature is activated which really doesn't come out very often, and it could be strident frustration almost all the way to outright anger. Now, you have a reputation for avoiding outright conflict. You would prefer not to get involved in those one-to-one situations, but Mars is really changing the whole dynamic, and because it's going to be in the part of your chart which is to do with your ego and your identity through to the 4th of November, and returning back there on the 6th of January through to the 18th of April next year, this very extended period of Mars in your sign could make you or see you change your approach and become much more assertive. Now, if you still use some tactics in order to make your points, perhaps the other person will hear. But if you push too hard, it could actually create a lot of hostility. So I think the potential for some choppy conditions around all sorts of relationships is quite strong towards the end of this month. But I must stress, it's possible that you do need to stand up some of your points of view, particularly if you have been, as you see it, bending over backwards to make sure that everybody else's needs are addressed, and you're very supportive of them because you can be ultra nurturing. So it may be an opportunity to redress the balance, both the full moon and also Mars's opposition with Pluto towards the end of this month. But if you do want a bit more of a playful time of it and be a bit freer and break free from some restrictions, you also have that opportunity towards the end of October too. Have a great month. And do please check out that year 2025 personal horoscope forecast offer. You'll get the rest of this year free, but also 30% off with your life roadmap report, all based totally on your unique birth data, and great value too. Please see the link below for more. Welcome Leo to your in-depth monthly horoscope for October 2024 for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. Please do take advantage of your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data. If you order it now, you can get the rest of year 2024 free, plus your life roadmap report and 30% off. On the screen now is the event chart right at the start of the month. As ever, we need to be mindful of your ruler, the sun. And the sun is being shadowed in a dazzling way by Mercury, the planet of communication. But this combination came to a high point as September came to a close. So we entered the new month on the back of a GEMINI. So if there's something that you want to manifest, not just this month, but also over the next 6 months, which is very intrinsic to expressing your individuality, strengthening your identity, and really showing people just how gifted, creative and artistic you can be, what an incredible start to this month. Also, we need to be mindful of the moon. The moon's in your second house, about everyday resources, self-worth, values. It is being checked by Saturn, so joint resources could be a little bit of a tender point this month, or perhaps someone sees what you're trying to achieve in a more individual way. Maybe they're looking at it more in black and white terms when it comes to the cost, and not necessarily appreciating that what you're starting now could end up being something really exciting, but it may take some time, patience and persistence to really get it where you need to be. The other big takeout at the start of this month is that you may find yourself attracted to modifying your home. This is because Venus is in your 4th house, and this is a great time therefore to think about the colour scheme you have, the space you've got. If you're down south, perhaps even your outdoor space, because Venus can be about beautifying. Of course, it can be about relationships, and the 4th house can be about family relationships or the emotional dimension of a romantic relationship. But by the end of the first week, Venus forges a very solid alliance with Saturn in the part of your scope to do with those shared resources that the moon was suggesting at the start of the month could be an issue. So if you are lucky enough to be in a very give and take relationship where there's a real understanding of what you're trying to do, but also you can work together, you can really celebrate the magic of that tie as the first week of the month draws to a close. But that solar eclipse, it does need to interact with the lunar eclipse, which occurred across the 17th and 18th of September. And that had Neptune in the mix. Neptune is a magical influence, very mystical too. It can also make us at times a little bit unsure, and for you since 2012 it has been in the part of your chart to do with devotion, where you're most invested. If there have been times when perhaps you've given the best of yourself but it hasn't always felt it's been reciprocated, Saturn moving into that area 2 years ago has been encouraging you to be more business-like. And as you come into this month, the energy from that lunar eclipse is still swirling around. So to make it work with the solar eclipse across the 2nd or the 3rd, depending on where you live, you need to balance what you need, the solar eclipse, the 1st house, with the 8th house, either shared resources, money, can be to do with long-term investments, or more spiritually, your deep connection to someone in a more devotional way. And the 1st and 8th houses don't really align. So it's going to be important to stay mindful of that part of your chart, not just this month, but also through the next 5 months too. But that doesn't mean to say you can't still make that dart forwards to really establish and firm up the exciting plans that are shaping up for you. But on the 9th, Jupiter, the planet of growth, optimism, traditionally of good fortune, the greater benefit in traditional astrology, does go into its annual 4-month retrograde. That can slow things down, and for you it's in the part of your situation to do with friendships, your long-term plan, but also your higher principles, and Jupiter can be linked to that, to be fair. But right from that point, Venus starts to go into an opposition with the position of Uranus. And Uranus for you is in your 10th house. And that means that your appreciation of fresh and novel approaches, particularly in terms of your work, has probably been strengthened as time's gone on since 2019. But the opposition with Venus suggests that something to do with your work could create some sudden changes which may upset a plan or your diary, perhaps the amount of time you want to spend with a loved one. So there could be some professional demands at the heart of this month. On the 12th, however, Pluto goes direct. It's been in retrograde since May, but in the 6th house for you since the 2nd of September. So if you have found yourself since then thinking very much about practicalities, work, your physical well-being, Pluto going direct is obviously an asset. Once it goes back into Aquarius on the 19th of November, relationships come much more sharply into focus. But to be honest, the day after that, on the 13th, Mercury moves into Scorpio, joining up with Venus. But Venus is about to leave on the 17th. But Mercury will also be joined by the Sun on the 22nd, and both of them clash with Pluto. The reason for that, in terms of Mercury and the Sun moving into your 4th house, home, emotion, family, clashing with Pluto, it's because Pluto's so late and they're so early, so we still get the square. So the inference here with Mercury squaring up to Pluto is that you could feel around the situation, you could feel the emotional dimension of it. It could build up some energy within you that you might find it a bit more difficult to express. Mercury in Scorpio can be very good at teasing out what's underneath the surface, but actually Mercury in house 4 actually saying it outwards can be a challenge. So what happens is that ideas or thoughts or emotions go around our mind, but we don't find it quite so easy to articulate them. Well, that brings us to the full moon. It's a dramatic full moon. It's in your sister fire sign of Aries, and it occurs on the 17th. On the same day, Venus moves out of the thoughtful Scorpio and into the very glamorous and very charismatic and even romantic, certainly social sign of Sagittarius, your sister fire sign. And that is something that provides some uplift, but that full moon does give you food for thought. And the reason for that is this. For you, Aries represents the 9th house, which is your higher principles, travel, expansion, independence. The Sun, however, is in the third house of quick communications, but they're T-squared by Mars, and Mars is in your 12th house. Has been since the 4th of September, will be to the 4th of November. It's going to come back there on the 6th of January to the 18th of April. So a mightily long 22-week period. If we think that Mars usually makes its way through each sign for 6 weeks, it did start its process in the sign of Cancer for you by potentially making you more conscious of stuff from your past. What Mars can do in the 12th house, because the 12th house can be about secret enemies, Mars can be about anger, but the 12th house can also be about our psychology, our shadow side, the parts of ourselves that we're not so aware of, or conversely we don't really want to look at. Could be to do with past upsets, separations. And it's possible that this particular full moon could be very triggering for emotions coming up from the depths. But if that happens and you do feel a need to express them, the chances are you're going to express things very directly, because Mars is the ruler of the sign of Aries, of course, and the 9th house is where you need to feel that your more profound ideas and beliefs can have an outlet. So you could feel more emotional on that full moon for the following 2 weeks. Now Venus moving into that playful location in Sagittarius suggests that with the right people or the right person, you could find yourself having quite a jolly time. For some Leos, it isn't completely beyond the amount of probability that you could have a reconnection with someone. Now it could be someone you knew through work, someone who was quite influential, but it might have a sexual connotation to it. But just be aware that what the full moon's asking you to do is establish your truth. But the subconscious psychological areas of Mars could see something's come up that not even you're expecting, and it may see you being a little bit more on edge than you're used to, and suddenly emotions will need to come out quite quickly. But on the 22nd, the Sun joins up with Mercury in Scorpio. Scorpio is a sign which has a reputation for intensity, but the 4th house is where we rest, where we take a breather. If we think about the journey of the zodiac, the animals, so we start with the ram in Aries, then we have the bull in Taurus, then we have the quick wits of the winged messenger, the twins in Gemini, and then we get to Cancer and it's a rest. So the frenetic energy of that full moon could see you wanting to just go inside yourself a little bit, particularly as Mercury is already sheltering from the storm, if you like, in Scorpio, but it does square up with Pluto. If you feel that in a current relationship, someone's not really understanding and really giving you the support that you need to manifest that big plan that's definitely going to come with the solar eclipse, you could feel quite on edge towards the end of this month. Venus then goes into a clash with Saturn in House 8. If you feel someone's a bit controlling or possessive or a bit jealous, doesn't really like you having your own friends, that could be an issue. And then in the last week, Mars goes into a mighty opposition with Pluto. Now that's going to happen across your sign and Aquarius as we go into the new year. It's also going to happen again in your sign and Aquarius on the 18th of April. But the thing with Mars in Leo, it loves being there, whereas Mars in Cancer doesn't. So that psychological energy could be activated by a work-based relationship, I feel, as this month draws to a close. Why would I say that? Because Pluto's so late in Capricorn, it is in House 6 until the 19th of November, but it's so close to Aquarius, I feel that the overlay, if we think about houses, where Pluto starts and ends, really goes into Aquarius. So if there isn't an emotional dimension around a professional relationship which isn't going quite so well, and you feel someone isn't supporting you around what you see as a very exciting plan, then that could see you exercising a part of your nature, or demonstrating, I should say, a part of your nature that could surprise the other person by the sheer, raw, visceral energy that you express. And even if you're a pretty easygoing Leo, you may be surprised by feeling a bit on edge if you feel someone's not really honouring you, respecting you. And that full moon really is about people really trusting your judgment around your ideas. And, you know, we all get challenged. Not everybody agrees with us. You know, on YouTube, I will get people say my videos are too long, too short. You can get that comment coming back to back. You can't please all of the people. But I feel that this is something much more profound, because usually you like to maintain your equilibrium, because obviously feeling respected, feeling admired, and feeling at the very best adored is very important to a Leo. But something could get under your skin as this month draws to a close, so you need to prepare yourself for it. And if there have been some old issues, and we all have them, people who've passed, traffic accidents, even if they're little prangs, they can have an effect on us. Maybe some periods of our life where we experience some difficulties and hardship. Those are the type of things that could come up in a surprising way this month, but particularly towards the end. But certainly at the start of the month and through the next 6 months from the start of October, if you've got an ambitious project that's really important to you, grip that tiller of your life direction really firmly and don't budge, but just be prepared that there could be some turbulence towards the end of this month for more emotional kind, but it may be stuff that you've stored away, not even consciously, that may need to come out, be looked at, dealt with and released. Have a great month, Leo. And do please check out that year 2025 personal horoscope forecast offer. You'll get the rest of this year free, but also 30% off with your life roadmap report, all based totally on your unique birth data, and great value too. Please see the link below for more. Welcome Virgo to your in-depth monthly horoscope for October 2024 for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. Please do take advantage of your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data. If you order it now, you can get the rest of year 2024 free, plus your life roadmap report and 30% off. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the month, and your ruler Mercury is right at the heart of the action, because as September came to a close, Virgo, there was a glorious cazimi, a superior conjunction that brought the curtain down on that month. So that energy is casting its magic into the start of this month, and crucially also over the next 6 months too. So why is that? Well, it's because we have a solar eclipse across the 2nd or 3rd of October, depending on where you are. But because Mercury is so close to the sun, what a cazimi is the rays of the sun amplifies the qualities of your ruler. Now, through your sign, Mercury is very much about precision, analysis, a dry look at situations where you drill down into the deeper parts of it to see where you can make small but important refinements and improvements. Mercury's rulership of Gemini, very much about quick communications. But for you, the host, Libra, is about balance, but it's also about articulating a message. The 2nd house for you is about everyday money, self-worth, values and resources. Those can be critical for you over the next 6 months. So as you start this month, there's a big story developing there for you, because your ability to really be very assured in terms of your assessment of situations can see you teasing out more value, making some very astute decisions around your resources. Perhaps if you're looking to start a new business, you're going to do so in a very shrewd and canny way with the help of that solar eclipse. What's not to like? Well, also the moon at the start of this month is in your sign, so that's going to give you a greater ability to be single-minded. It is opposed by Saturn. You can't assume that everybody will necessarily buy in to what you want to achieve, not just in October, but through to next year. However, the lunar eclipse, which occurred across the 17th or 18th of September, was in your opposite sign where Saturn is, but that was very close to the shifting misty energies of Neptune. And to make this solar eclipse work, you always need to be mindful of how someone else will see what you're trying to do. It doesn't necessarily have to be a business partner or a romantic partner. It could just be other people you do need to collaborate with. And because Neptune was in the mix, that can distort. So the fact that the moon's in your sign opposed by Saturn at the start of this month is an early warning that there could be some obstacles ahead. Not everybody is necessarily going to be applauding you for what you're trying to develop. But it is true that Venus in the start of this month is in a part of your scope which will give you the ability to express your ideas in a very diplomatic way, but also a meaningful way. And in fact, by the end of the first week, Venus and Saturn are in a great alliance. So if you say what you mean and mean what you say, but you've done your homework, which of course would be very much in keeping with your sign, and there is something you're really excited about, you want to go with, you will have prepared yourself for any objections that could come your way, because they could be based on people not quite being aware fully of what you're trying to do. However, in terms of ambitions and goals, it's undeniable that Jupiter, going into a retrograde from the 9th through to the first week of February next year for 4 months, which is an annual event, could potentially slow things down in terms of goals and ambitions, but particularly where those goals and ambitions aren't very realistic, because Jupiter can kid us into thinking that anything is possible. But Jupiter's not at its best in the sign of Gemini. It does give you a chance through to June the 9th, 2025, to demonstrate to people how talented you are, but you need to be able to deliver on it. So Jupiter slowing down in the retrograde from 21 degrees could see you thinking a lot about the big picture of your life when it comes to work, goals and ambitions. From the 12th, Pluto goes direct in the part of your chart, very late in the sign of Capricorn, which is the 5th house, which can be very joyful, playful, expressive. And it has been there since the 2nd of September, but it is going to go back into your sector of practicalities from the 19th of November. So this is the last Pluto direct in Capricorn any of us will experience in our lifetime. So because it's also an earth sign like yours, if there is something you really are enjoying, or if there's a relationship you're enjoying, this could be an important period. But talking about relationships, Venus is in a chatty area at the start of this month, but it does forge an opposition from the 12th to the 17th, which becomes exact on the 14th, with the rather unsettling energy of Uranus. But what can happen is you may decide to take a journey. It may be a bit of a spontaneous decision, maybe to go with a friend somewhere, go on the train and have an exciting day out. You may go on a city break. You may decide to go last minute to watch a band or a play, a show, and that can create a lot of excitement. But if you're in a relationship which has become a little bit too humdrum, the opposition between Uranus and Venus is pushing you both to try to find ways to reignite the spark between you. But you get additional help because on the 13th, Mercury, your ruler, moves into the chattiest part of your scope. But it does forge a very brittle, tense right angle with Pluto. You might find for a few days after then that your energy could be a little bit edgy, and maybe something someone says can just be a little bit more irritating than usual. But on the 17th, we have two key events. Venus is going to move into the sign of Sagittarius, which is lovely for you if you're wanting to make some modifications to your home. But there's also a full moon on the same day. A full moon in your 8th house. That's where we're deeply invested financially or emotionally. The 2nd house, where the sun is that everyday reality that the solar eclipse is asking you to grapple with. It's just that Mars, in the friendliest part of your scope, but also the sector that's to do with your future, but your highest values, that is in a very difficult, tense T-square with the lunation. If what you're trying to, or what you'd like to achieve in your life does need some funding, and you need to work with someone else in order to get it, and they don't see it the same, that could create the potential for quite an argument, to be honest. I don't often use that word at all, but Mars in Cancer can be reactive. It can be a bit prickly and defensive. For you in the 11th house, it loses some of its ego because it's much more concerned with creating the group five as well as standing up what we need as individuals. But when it comes to money, shared resources, or perhaps is there someone in your friendship group that you're developing a massive interest in, and that might in some ways create some politics. And because of Venus and Uranus previous to that being in that electric opposition, that potential for a sudden fascination with someone is there at the heart of this month. But on the 22nd, the Sun joins up with Mercury in the sign of Scorpio. The thing that you're going to notice is the pace of life picks up. But also, that part of you that can be very conscientious can almost be triggered, and you can find yourself almost rushing around trying to do too much, trying to be too virtuous, or trying to express some ideas in a very quick way that you rush them, a little bit uncharacteristically. Also, Venus squares up with Saturn towards the end of this month. However much there has been the potential for some flirty exchanges, the emotional reality of one tie could become much more apparent as the month closes. But also in the last week, Mars and Pluto, the two co-regents of the sign of Scorpio, which of course is where the Sun and the Mercury are for you as this month comes to an end, in your third house of quick communications, they go into a massive standoff. And it's a massive standoff that's going to be repeated. It'll be repeated at the end of this year. It's going to be repeated at the start of next year. It's going to be repeated on the 18th of April. But this particular version of it, with the position of Mars in Cancer, which can be very sensitive, but therefore the more feisty energy of Mars doesn't really sit there very well, you may find yourself either having a clash with a friend because you see a situation very differently, or there could be a massive attraction that you find very, very difficult to avoid. It's going to be interesting because Mars is in the part of your scope until the 4th of November that's about your future hopes. And Mars obviously gives us drive, but also gives us desire. But it is intrinsically linked to the first house, what we want in terms of our identity. And that doesn't always work where other people are involved. And the 11th house is the collective, it's friendships. So some politics could bring this month to an end. Or are you going to get caught up in something where the energy of a group of people is so exciting that you find it very difficult not to be part of it? But you may find that someone else close to you is a little bit judgmental about your interest in this group. But the picture big, Virgo, is if you really want to take your resources, your qualities, your skills and talents seriously, the next 6 months give you a superb opportunity to go for it. But you need to work or be conscious of working closely with others who may see it different. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great month. And do please check out that year 2025 personal horoscope forecast offer. You'll get the rest of this year free, but also 30% off with your life roadmap report, all based totally on your unique birth data, and great value too. Please see the link below for more. Welcome Libra to your in-depth monthly horoscope for October 2024 for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. Please do take advantage of your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data. If you order it now, you can get the rest of year 2024 free, plus your life roadmap report and 30% off. On the screen now is the event chart right at the start of the month, and it's truly exciting for you. because Mercury, the planet of communication, is just aligned with the Sun as we make our way into the new month. The reason for that is that as September came to a close, we had a cazimi, a Mercury cazimi, a superior conjunction with Mercury direct. That gives you the opportunity to showcase your individual ideas with flair, persuasion, confidence and singularity, because of course the Sun is in your sign. When we have the Sun and Mercury together in the first house, it can be very much about initiation. So if there is something that's important to you that you want to bring to life, the next 6 months, not just this month, can be critical to the whole process. Now, if you want to understand this in terms of the eclipse season, please check out my special eclipse video by clicking on the link on the screen now. But what this gives you a chance to do is really concentrate on what's important in terms of your individuality. Because if we think about the lunar eclipse, which occurred across the 17th and 18th of September, it was in the sign of Pisces, which for you is about sacrifices. It's about discipline. It can be about where we have obligations and where we need to lean into the needs of others, be of service. But Neptune's been in that area since 212, and that eclipse was very close to Neptune. If you've given so much of yourself that it almost feels like you're pouring from an empty vase, this particular solar eclipse is a reminder to take the power back, and that could mean setting some boundaries. And that is spoken of really in a symbolic way at the start of this month, with the moon being in your 12th house, which is deep, can be a bit reflective, maybe even a little withdrawn, but it is in an opposition with Saturn, which over the last couple of years has been making those responsibilities, that work, the load, the demand, that much more onerous for you. So as you come into this new month, you will need to really be clear, and that's where Mercury can help, about what you want to achieve, but you can't change the fact that some people could still have a set of expectations for you, or perhaps it's the lifestyle that you've set up, particularly if it's quite work orientated. And if that has meant within all the giving and energies that you've put into supporting others, that you've been putting your individual needs second, that's what you're being asked to redress this month, but also over the next half year. Now, as the month begins, your ruler Venus is in a great part of your scope for money. If you are negotiating something, Venus forges a very strong link by Saturn by the end of the first week. You could seal the deal, and that can give you an enormous uplift to take you forwards this month. But on the 9th, the planet of fortune, Jupiter, which is in the part of your scope very much to do with travel, expanding your horizons, anything to do with independence, higher education, but also anything to do with agreements, that also goes into a retrograde for 4 months. But it is still going to forge an amazing link with your Sun right at the heart of this month. So don't believe just because of the retrograde that nothing can go forwards in a fortunate way. It's just not as simple as that. For starters, it depends on where Jupiter's retrograde in your natal chart. It starts its retrograde at 21 degrees, but if we're talking in terms of the ascendant, the Sun or the Moon, I feel that Jupiter retrograde is just going to ask you to think more of the Pisces Jupiterian energies, be a bit more thoughtful about the deeper meaning of things, less actually physically outgoingly positive, but it doesn't mean to say it still can't support you. Now, from the 12th through to the 17th, Venus, your ruler, is in an opposition with Uranus. You could find yourself in a surprisingly impulsive mood. Perhaps it is going to be a must-have item that you set your eyes on. Once your gaze is locked in, it could prove to be irresistible. But equally, of course, Venus can be about relationships, and in your second house, it can be about intimacy and sensuality. Uranus, however, is in the part of your chart which is to do with where you'd be most sexually or intimately connected, And therefore there's a paradox with that, because ever since March 2019, you may have found it quite difficult to maintain that closeness to one person, or perhaps more than one person, because there's another part of you that wants to get in touch with what's really deeply psychologically the reality for you. So that's been a bit counterintuitive to that other side of your nature, which naturally likes to relate well and get on well with other people. So it could be a little bit of excitement or impulsiveness at the heart of this month, but equally you could have a quarrel about money if you and a partner see things in a very different way. Pluto goes direct on the 12th. I think because Pluto affected Libra so strongly since 2008, and since the 2nd of September round to now has been in retrograde in the 4th house, there may have been some stuff to do with deep emotions and family that may have come up again. However, on the 13th, Mercury moves into Scorpio, joining up briefly with Venus, and that could give you a bit more desire to make the financial situation work quicker for you, because Mercury is about our thinking, but it does clash with Pluto, and Pluto's so late in Capricorn, it's almost like a second 5th house square, which can see us again tempted to do something quickly on impulse. It can also see us fancy a flutter. The 5th house can be about speculation. So if you are tempted to do something quickly, very important to get all the information. But then on the 17th, there is a full moon in your opposite sign, but it squares up with Mars in a very authoritative part of your chart, as it will be through to the 4th of November, and then again from the 6th of January through to the 18th of April. Mars in the 10th house is giving you added oomph, but it's also giving you greater desire to have your voice heard, to raise your profile, but also to be more self-confident about your worldly interactions. But that could mean that you encounter someone such as a line manager, could be a friend, could be a family member, even a partner, who's not, as you see it, tuning into what you think or respecting where you're coming from. And that can create quite a lot of tension for us all, to be honest. But on the 17th, Venus for you moves into a glorious location. It moves into Sagittarius, which can be about higher truth, but for you the 3rd house is about quick communications, and the svelte energies of Venus gives you a chance to say how you feel, but with a fair degree of diplomacy, at least initially. But the 22nd, the Sun joins Mercury and moving into Scorpio, your 2nd house, and that desire to really get your resources working efficiently is going to be strengthened, but that too squares with Pluto. Pluto and Sun angles can create obsession, but also a singularity of purpose, but also it can see people taking very entrenched views, because will or power is a big part of the dynamic. So you may find that someone that you're working with doesn't have an understanding of where you're coming from, your values, your principles, and it could be someone you're fond of, and you may have to have a tussle about it, which could be borne out by Venus's square with Saturn as the month comes to a close. That's an aspect that can be a relationship breaker in some situations, and also Mars goes into an opposition with Pluto at the end of the week too. You've got to be careful if you're pushing hard to gain that extra respect that you feel you deserve with Mars in Cancer, that you don't push so hard that something gives to the point of breaking. And so that's a potential with Mars opposite Pluto, because it's going to make everyone potentially quite bloody minded. For you, because Mars is in such a dominant position, but in a sign which is not where it's at its best, you could overestimate your authority and not recognise enough your needs and emotions, and perhaps even vulnerabilities, which could be borne out by Pluto. So don't force things too hard, but essentially the start of this month is very much about injecting an ongoing plan with greater determination and drive, starting something fresh and new, and you can, with Mercury's help, really gain traction quickly. Jupiter still forges an amazing link with your Sun at the heart of this month, So there could be some kind of collaboration that develops, but equally something that isn't working around a relationship is likely to show up in the latter part of this month, and you just need to use the position you're going to take, the responses you're going to take in a proportionate way, or something could get a little bit too tense, which isn't for anyone's benefit. And this is where your natural ability to try to keep a sense of equilibrium can be such a gift to you, for sure. Have a great month, Libra. And do please check out that year 2025 personal horoscope forecast offer. You'll get the rest of this year free, but also 30% off with your life roadmap report, all based totally on your unique birth data, and great value too. Please see the link below for more. Welcome, Scorpio, to your in-depth monthly horoscope for October 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun, or the Moon. Please do take advantage of your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data. If you order it now, you can get the rest of year 2024 free, plus your life roadmap report and 30% off. On the screen now, I'm sharing your event chart right at the start of the month, which will prove influential. Now, as last month came to a close, the Sun coalesced with Mercury, the planet of communication, but also the planet of precision, in an exact alliance known as a GEMINI. So as you make your way into this new month, the psychological energy that they're arousing, because for you they're in house 12, which can be where we want to withdraw, reflect, heal, perhaps consider issues to do with our past, or even just pause and rest. They're blending into the solar eclipse, which occurs across the 2nd and 3rd. And that's an energy that doesn't just provide a backdrop for this month, but for the next 6 months ahead. That solar eclipse has to collaborate with the lunar eclipse, which occurred across the 17th and 18th of September in the part of your scope very much to do with manifesting your joys, anything to do with playfulness, fun, sociability, romance, if you have done your children's activities. But that 12th house energy, because it is more reflective, doesn't really blend in with that more outgoing lunar energy. So how do you make these come together this month? A further paradox comes in the sense that your two ruling planets are so stridently influential this month, not least Mars. Mars is your traditional ruler and starts and ends this month in a part of your situation which is very adventurous, but also can be very outspoken. Mars is in the sign of Cancer. It's not its best host. It's known as being in full here. Mars can be assertive, and it's also about our desires. But the sign of Cancer is much more to do with emotions. But you could find yourself being much more outspoken about how you feel about things this month. But how does that work with that energy which is shimmering in the 12th house, which could bring to the fore that part of you that can favour privacy and keeping things to yourself? Well, I feel it is going to create some turbulence, to be honest, but that doesn't mean to say there's not opportunities. Over the next half year, if there are issues from your distant past that still need resolution, could have been some upsets, separations, losses, or perhaps there's some anxieties that are still washing around inside of you, that solar eclipse gives you a wonderful opportunity to work with those in a very productive way. Also, as this month begins, Venus, the planet of relating, but also money, is in your sign. And although the Moon and Saturn are in opposition as we go into October, Venus by the end of the first week is aligning with Saturn in your 5th house, along with where that lunar eclipse occurred, in a very constructive way. So the relationships that are solid are going to bring you a lot of reassurance by the end of the first week. But what you may need to consider, particularly with the Moon in a very sociable part of your scope at the start of the month, but opposing Saturn, is if there are some fair weather players around you, you may become much more conscious of who you can really rely upon and trust over the following 4 weeks. We can have people in our lives who are those really trusted citizens. They may not always be the most glamorous person that's capturing our attention at any given time, but those people that are very solid are the people that you can start to appreciate strongly by the end of that first week. But this is a month when Jupiter, the planet of opportunity, does start to go through its annual retrograde. And for you, Jupiter's in the part of your scope to do with long-term financial opportunities, business, entrepreneurship. Does that mean you're going to be unlucky? No. Jupiter retrograde just helps us and will help you over the next 4 months through to the start of February next year to just become a little bit more conscious about some of the deeper transitions that are going on in your life. Jupiter can be about knowledge, it can be about faith, it's not just about luck around loot. But the 8th house can be where we're most devoted, and because of that 12th house energy making you think and reflect about the reliability and sincerity of some people in your situation, certainly through the start of this month, you could be questioning certain associations. But on the 12th, Pluto, your modern ruler, ends a retrograde which began in May, initially in your sector of home and emotion, and since the 2nd of September in the part of your scope to do with your everyday connections. Through to the 19th of November, you have a glorious opportunity to assert your point of view. And that really crystallizes in a very powerful way at the end of this month, as I'll shortly explain. But right at the heart of this month, Venus in your sign goes into an electric opposition with Uranus in the part of your scope to do with relationships. So that could give you a desire to connect to someone new or escape from a relationship which isn't really serving your greater good. Now, Jupiter forges a very lucky link with the Sun on the 14th of this month, along with the exact opposition between Venus and Uranus. So right at the heart of this month could prove pivotal for you, not least that Mercury returns to your sign on the 13th. Mercury and the Sun being in your 12th house may have seen you not quite as fluid or not quite so able to express yourself. Also, Mercury in the 12th house can see us a little bit more anxious and feel that people are not necessarily keeping us in the loop. Ironically though, Mercury does clash with your modern ruler as soon as it moves into your sign, and that could give you, along with the Sun's return on the 22nd after an 11-month hiatus, and also clashing with Pluto, could give you food for thought around certain family associations. However, Pluto going direct, I feel, through to the 19th of the month does give you a chance to really think clearly and strategize about the things that are important to you, your ideas. But on the 17th, we have a full moon. It features the other sign that's ruled by Mars along with yours, Aries. Aries is the sign of initiation, of beginnings. Having the moon here is quite a raw influence. It's the 6th house for you, but it goes face to face with the Sun in the 12th. Particularly at work, if you have been in an environment which has felt a little bit hostile, distant, perhaps not particularly supportive, your emotions around that can explode to the surface if you feel that anyone's trying to subtly manipulate or undermine you. Because a 6th, 12th house full moon can see people playing some games, office politics, but not necessarily openly expressing their opposition. But because Mars, your traditional ruler, intersects the position of the moon and also the Sun, and is a very strident influence in house 9 and in the sensitive host of Mars, could see you, if you feel that people have been plotting in any way, may seem like a strong word, you may want to push back in an incredibly strong way. And you're going to be able to do it, because with Venus moving on the 17th into your sector of resources, you're going to have some good fortune in terms of finances, which will give you some uplift. But then once the sun returns back to your sign on the 22nd, you're going to come into the moment. You're going to recover your poise. Your physical vitality will improve. Some of the fear or anxiety or stress that you may have encountered from that full moon will start to dissipate. It is true the sun, like Mercury, clashes with Pluto. Maybe it's a sibling that you could find isn't quite as supportive as you would like. Maybe it's a neighbour or someone you encounter daily who ordinarily you've been pretty close to. Remember, the big picture over the next 6 months is to basically rinse from your situation the people or situations which no longer serve your greater good. And if you're becoming slowly but surely aware of who is in your corner and who isn't, I feel that the tensions that can occur towards the end of this month is all part of a bigger process of you taking a firmer grip on your life direction. Now, in the last week, despite Venus being in a positive location for loot and also the more sensual side of loving, it does clash with the cold Saturn in the part of your scope to do with speculation. If someone talks about a get-rich idea, a side hustle, I would be a bit skeptical towards the end of this month, because Saturn in the 5th house is asking you to enjoy your life and to take your hobbies and skills seriously, but also to be very realistic about who you connect to. So equally, if you find someone that you really fancy towards the end of this month, I wouldn't spoil them with any grand gestures. Let the relationship develop very naturally. But as the month comes to an end, probably one of the most potent events of the whole year is that your two rulers go face to face in a mighty cosmic clash. Mars in the 9th house in Cancer, as I said, can give you a desire to escape. The 9th house is very much about freedom and independence, but travel. But the host, Cancer, is very sensitive and can be a bit reactive here with Mars. But having Pluto for the last time, this last phase, back in your 3rd house of everyday communications means that you could have a massive discussion at the end of this month, which could go all the way to an outright disagreement. But the key is, with your two rulers both being a very willful combination, your sex appeal and desires are going to be amped up to a maximum level. If you did encounter someone who really switched on your mind, was very active, or someone who surprised you in some ways by the strength of their personality, you might find them a very evocative influence that's hard to resist. But equally, you could find yourself having an outright conflict with someone who has a different viewpoint to you. And of course, we got the run up to the American election. There are very polarized views on either side. If you're someone who's very invested in that whole process, you may find yourself having some strident conversations. That would be understandable, but also understand that with Mars in opposition with Pluto, it can be a dust-up that can lead to a complete breakdown in a relationship. So it's important to understand how to use power and force appropriately. But certainly it's a month that begins with you being encouraged to look at the more psychological, emotional and spiritual side of your nature and situation. That's going to go on for the next 6 months. The more you understand those motivations, the more you can make your love and social life work for you in 2025 in a positive way. And believe me, there are going to be some enormous opportunities to play. However, later in the month, you get a chance to become much more single-minded, but also if there are some relationships, professional, personal, friendships, or romantic, that need to change, go through the transition knowing that actually what you're doing is reinforcing what's important for you as an individual. As much as we can want to have equilibrium in our relationships, if you're giving away your power too much and people aren't appreciating you, it's all about setting your boundaries. Have a great month, and do please check out that year 2025 personal horoscope forecast offer. You'll get the rest of this year free, but also 30% off with your life roadmap report, all based totally on your unique birth data and great value too. Please see the link below for more. Welcome Sagittarius, your in-depth monthly forecast for October 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. Please do take advantage of your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data. If you order it now, you can get the rest of year 2024 free, plus your life roadmap report and 30% off. On the screen now, I'm showing your event chart right at the start of the month, which will prove influential. You can see the Sun, which is always the key influence, is cresting in the part of your situation to do with friendships, connections, your network, your higher values, but also your social life. And it's very close to Mercury. As we came to the end of September, we had a superior conjunction between the Sun and Mercury, a GEMINI. So as you come into this new month, there's a real opportunity to ignite or step up your interactions with others in a very positive way. But we also need to be mindful of the Moon. The Moon's in a very visible part of your situation, very much to do with how you feel about your worldly interactions, but that is checked off by Saturn, which of course is a more somber influence, and that is in your sector of emotion. If you recall, across the 17th and 18th of September, we had a lunar eclipse, like Saturn, in your 4th house of emotion. But that was very close to the other planet there, Neptune, which is a shimmering, mesmeric influence. But over the last couple of years, anything to do with where you live, family responsibilities and situations may have proved somewhat limiting, or certainly been a greater focus in your situation. And for a freedom lover like you, that hasn't necessarily been easy. Also, as we start this month, Venus, the planet of relating, is cocooned away in a rather private area, which could see you thinking very carefully about certain alliances. If we also think about the energy of that lunar eclipse, which will last for 6 months, working on your inner world but connecting it to your connections in your outer world is going to be how you're going to thread the two eclipses together. So the solar eclipse, which occurs across the 2nd and 3rd of this month, may be bright and breezy in the host Libra, very much about communication, very much about fairness, balance and equilibrium. But whoever you connect to, they need to have a part of their nature which you can relate to in an emotionally fulfilling and meaningful way. So some more fair weather type of friendships could start to make way as you make your way through this month. But what about your ruler Jupiter? Well, Jupiter starts this month continuing its journey through your sector of relating. Jupiter can bring fortune, but we can't also just expect it to land in our laps. And the host, Gemini, it's not its favourite location, and it does slam on the celestial breaks for 4 months from the 9th of this month through till the start of February next year. Now, this is an annual event. Jupiter retrograde can slow down that part it's influencing, so your connections to others. But I feel it's just asking you, a bit like that lunar eclipse and Saturn's presence, to be mindful of the depth of your connections. So you can have some lovely, sparkling experiences, particularly this month, around the 14th, when the Sun and Jupiter forge one of astrology's most wonderful connections, a trine, which can be very lucky. So despite Jupiter's retrograde, there may be someone that you're going to link to who you really seem to have a simpatico with, and that could be a new friendship, a new alliance, which could prove to be very valuable to you. But we do have, from the 12th of this month through to the 17th, those energies of Venus in that sheltered area, which is making you think about your deeper connections. It does go into an opposition with Uranus. If you feel in an existing relationship, it doesn't have to be romantic, that there's a lot of sacrifice involved for you, and that does in some ways constrain your individual needs, that could be something you'll want to push back against. from the 12th, Pluto goes direct. It went retrograde in May, initially in Aquarius. It inverted into your sector of everyday money from the 2nd of September. But you know, from now through to the 18th, 19th of November, you have a great opportunity to deploy all the lessons and experiences you've gained with Pluto's transition through Capricorn since 2008 by really getting the foundations of your world that much firmer. But on the 13th of this month, Mercury does move into a very private area. If there is part of you that does want to draw back and reflect, you have a great aptitude for knowledge, but knowledge doesn't necessarily have to be facts and figures. Mercury can be about communication, but moving into the 12th house can see you more thoughtful. It also links in a square with Pluto, so despite Pluto going direct, you may want to think very, very carefully about your values. Equally, it could be that something can be teased into the open that's a little more sensitive. On the 17th, we have the full moon. It's in your sister fire sign of Aries, which of course is a very powerful and passionate influence, but it goes face to face with the sun in that more sociable friendship area, the 11th house. What's not to like? Well, it's possible, Sagittarius, that you could find yourself having to juggle different demands. More than one person may want to spend time with you. Who do you let down, and how do you let down? But also because Mars, the planet of passion and desire, which for you is in your 8th house all month, which is very much a scorpionic influence. The 8th house is about long-term finances, can be where we're most emotionally, even sexually and intimately committed. That actually clashes with both the moon and the sun on that full moon. If you are tempted to speculate around a long-term financial project, I wouldn't be too rash. Mars can see us make some sudden, more impulsive decisions, and the 5th house, where the moon is, can be about speculation. But also, if you do feel somewhat controlled or hemmed in, a little bit of a theme, if we think from that opposition between Venus and Uranus, that full moon could see you want to extricate yourself, certainly at least have some space to do your own thing. But the arrival of Venus in your sign on the same day does bring you into the moment. If you have been deeply reflecting about one personal relationship, at least this gives you a chance to pause and think. Also, Venus moving into your own sign is a wonderful opportunity to remodel your wardrobe and your personal appearance. But on the 22nd, the Sun joins up with Mercury in Scorpio, which again is a sector of reflection. It too clashes with Pluto. This too could bring something into the open that's a bit delicate. Also in the last week of this month, Venus in your sign, dazzling for sure, but it then clashes with Saturn. If someone doesn't quite appreciate you, it could be revealed with all these energies towards the end of the month. But equally, it could be you becoming much more mindful of who those fair weather friends are that I mentioned before. Now, as the month comes to a close, if you are someone who's had your eye on a big ticket item, as Mars and Pluto go face to face in an opposition, your desire to splash out could be very strong indeed. But equally, you could be compelled towards a person who has a mesmeric energy in a more intimate way. But then in existing relationships, to be frank, there could be a quarrel around money, resources or values, because the 2nd and 8th houses are about those themes, but in slightly different ways. The 2nd house is about our everyday approach, our sense of worth, but also the cash, whereas the 8th house, where the position of Mars is, that's very much about the ongoing financial investments, business, entrepreneurship, anything to do with equities or inheritances or legacies. And there could be a little bit of a tussle as this month comes to a close if you encounter someone who has a very different viewpoint to you. But overwhelmingly, this is a month, Sagittarius, which suggests some new bright and very positive connections are going to be coming into your world, not just this month, but over the next 6 months. But I also feel that some people are going to make way who you start to see are not quite in tune with the deeper part of your emotional needs. Have a great month, and do please check out that year 2025 personal horoscope forecast offer. You'll get the rest of this year free, but also 30% off with your life roadmap report, all based totally on your unique birth data, and great value too. Please see the link below for more. Welcome Capricorn, your in-depth monthly forecast for October 2024 for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. Please do take advantage of your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data. If you order it now, you can get the rest of year 2024 free, plus your life roadmap report and 30% off. On the screen now, I'm showing your event chart right at the start of the month. As ever, we need to be mindful of the luminaries. The sun is in a very prominent, distinguished part of your chart, the 10th house, which is redolent of the core energies of your sign. It's about understanding responsibilities, obligations, but also being mindful of professional progress and goals. But the moon is in the part of your situation to do with freedom. Is there a link between the two areas? Are you thinking to change things up in terms of your worldly responsibilities? But the moon is opposite your ruler Saturn. So if there are discussions to have in the early part of this month, the chances are you will need to choose your words with care. But Venus, the planet of relating, is in a very sociable part of your situation. And indeed, by the end of the first week, forges a great link with your ruler Saturn. So there could be someone that you're getting more close to, could be in a professional situation, could be personally, but that friendship could become quite the alliance. But as we go into this new month, Mercury, the planet of communication, is in a dazzling alliance with the sun. And indeed, as September came to a close, the two were absolutely perfectly aligned. That's known as a cazimi, in this case a superior conjunction. So as we come into the new month, your thoughts around your role in life, your connection to people, your profile, if you are someone who's very ambitious, this is all working towards the solar eclipse across the 2nd or 3rd of October, which gives you an incredible opportunity for success over the next 6 months. But everyone's ambitions are different. Some people's might be to do with their hobbies, interests, time spent with grandchildren, or perhaps voluntary work in their local communities. And that could be, or those could be areas that are going to be key too. But that combination of Mercury is really interesting because Mercury is, of course, about communication through its rulership of Gemini, but precision through its rulership of Virgo. The 10th house is about knowledge in some ways with Mercury there, and it's possible the conversations that you have could be about reskilling, retraining, or perhaps letting someone know who's influential about the talents that you possess. But that solar eclipse, not just powerful this month, but across the next 6 months, needs to knit in with the lunar eclipse of the 17th or 18th of September. The two are from different series, but they still need to collaborate. And for you, that occurred in the same location as Saturn, the 3rd house, where it was very close to the mesmeric energies of Neptune. So your imagination certainly can be boosted over the next half year, but also your sensitivity. And sometimes in a professional environment, it's not always possible to express ourselves in the imaginative way we want. So there may be something that you have to flex around in order to still keep making progress with. But that brings us to the 9th, when Jupiter, the planet of fortune, goes into its annual 4-month retrograde. Jupiter going retrograde doesn't mean to say you're going to be unlucky. In fact, Jupiter forges an astonishingly positive angle to the Sun right at the heart of this month. That 6th, 10th house energy could prime up a new job for you, and it could be just the role that you've been looking for. But what Jupiter retrograde does do is make us think deeper about the structure of our life for you in the 6th house, but also things about your philosophies or knowledge around what you eat and drink, the amount of exercise you get, how your daily life works, which is what the 6th house is about. Jupiter can be a bit dismissive of details, but actually if you can stay with the details through to the early part of February next year, the more you can work this Jupiterian energy to your advantage. Now, I mentioned to you about Venus being in a very friendly area at the start of this month, but it also goes opposite Uranus. Uranus from the 12th through to the 17th is in an electric opposition to Venus. If you are single, that could bring someone into your world in a very quick way, and it could be through your work with all this big energy right at the top of your chart. Will this be a fleeting fling? Will it be just a new person that you just have an immediate rapport with, perhaps in a little bit of a zany way, and you can have some immediate fun? If in a long-term relationship things have become a little bit stuck and you're not quite sure whether you want to stay in that relationship, you could have some soul searching ahead as this month goes forwards. And the reason for that is, Capricorn, that Venus is going to move into your sector of reflection from the 17th and clash with your ruler in the last week. So if there is a relationship which you're not so invested in, could be a friendship, doesn't necessarily have to be romantic, you may find yourself wanting to perhaps have a bit more space, or perhaps even think about breaking free if it really is bumping along the bottom. But that can all be primed by Venus's opposition to Uranus. And that's astrology. It's not one-dimensional. It could bring someone in, it could take someone out. It just depends for you. It could just give you the push to shake up an existing tie and recreate it in a new dynamic and perhaps less predictable way. But on the 12th, Pluto in your sign, for its last pass in our lifetimes, from the 2nd of September, goes direct. From the 11th of May, it's been retracing its steps. Initially for you in the sign of Aquarius, very much about resources, self-worth and values. If there are still some outstanding strands about clarifying your life purpose, you get a window of opportunity through to the 19th of November to really kick on and get to grips with this. But Mercury on the 13th moves into your sector of friendship and sociability, joining with Venus initially, but it does clash with Pluto. It's an interesting one because if you have been rather caught up with professional demands, training or connecting, having interviews, doing presentations, really focusing in that area, you may be grateful that Mercury's given you the chance to play and connect with people. But again, it's the quality of those connections that you can ask yourself the questions about. Because it's important to understand, Capricorn, that Mars, the planet of drive and passion, a planet which is exalted in your sign, is in a very tender location all through this month for you, but also through to the 4th of November, and again from the 6th of January through to the 18th of April next year, and that is your sector of relationships. So that can make you more assertive about going for what you want and need, but also it can make you firmer about your boundaries. And the interesting thing about the full moon of the 17th is it does forge a T-square with that position of Mars. So the full moon for you is in the 4th house of home and emotion, the position of the sun cresting high in the sky, all to do with your connections professionally or in your worldly involvements. But Mars here suggests that if there is something out of kilter, you don't feel respected at work, or you don't feel that people at home are as attuned to your needs as you would like, you can find yourself really putting your foot down in a big way over the following 2 weeks. Then with Venus moving into your 12th house, it could make you quite sentimental for someone from your past. Will you reconnect? Perhaps look for them on social media? Possibly. Would it be the right thing to do? That depends on your unique circumstances. It's all about how lessons have been learned, or have people taken responsibility for what didn't quite work out before. And of course, we're all constantly evolving, so there could be an opportunity there, but it could just mean that you just want to think very deeply about the depth and value of certain connections. The Sun does move into a sociable area on the 22nd, but like Mercury, which it joins, it clashes with Pluto in your sign. Again, you're being asked to think about where your values and meshing with others, and if there is something that's not quite aligning, your desire to build up new alliances with different people can be emphasized, particularly with Venus squaring up with Saturn, your ruler, in the last week, which can be quite a challenge if there is a weak link around any connection. But in the last week of this month, we also have an opposition between the aforementioned Mars and the aforementioned Pluto. Now, these are the two rulers of Scorpio. Let's think about Scorpio. Scorpio is the sign of evolution, transition. It can be some very deep changes that go on. For you, this is the first house, Pluto, your identity and your persona. Mars is how you're connecting to others. It could be that you're going to draw to you someone who's absolutely totally fascinated with you, perhaps even in a romantic or intimate way. But equally, if a relationship hasn't really been working, your desire to assert in a very potent way what you expect from that situation can be magnified many times, and you could find yourself, even if you're quite a placid, easygoing Capricorn most of the time, being much fiercer in terms of imposing your will, because that's an opposition that's about willpower. Now, if it's used wrongly, it can see people try to dominate others in not a very pleasant way. But if you feel that all the goodwill that you try to create and all the support you give to others is not really being reciprocated, that could be a point in the month where you really push back very fiercely. So this month essentially gives you a great opportunity initially to reach for the stars around ambitions and goals, but you need to make sure that your communications are very clear, because that energy of that lunar eclipse influenced by Neptune means that someone may not see the beauty of your ideas as much as the harsh reality of what they expect. So you need to lean into those more worldly expectations. But if anyone can do that, it is you. And then as the month goes on, if there are any weak links around your friendships, your future direction, and you're not quite sure of certain players, you're going to want to address those weaknesses as the month draws to a close. Have a great month, Capricorn. And do please check out that year 2025 personal horoscope forecast offer. You'll get the rest of this year free, but also 30% off with your life roadmap report, all based totally on your unique birth data, and great value too. Please see the link below for more. Welcome Aquarius, your in-depth monthly horoscope for October 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. Please do take advantage of your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data. If you order it now, you can get the rest of year 2024 free, plus your life roadmap report and 30% off. On the screen now, I'm showing your event chart right at the start of the month, which will prove influential. Now, as we go into this new month, the glittering alliance between the Sun and Mercury as September came to a close, which was a cazimi, means that your ideas absolutely sparkle as you enter October. A cazimi gives us the opportunity to ramp up the natural energies of Mercury, very much communication through Gemini and precision through Virgo. But for you, the host, your sister air sign of Libra, very much about fairness, equilibrium and balance. But the ninth house can also be about travel, higher education, contracts, and any desire we have to open up our world and make it a little bit more adventurous, even independent. So that's the big theme as you come into this month, but certainly in terms of your thinking and your analysis. However, if you recall, across the 17th and 18th of September, depending on location, the lunar eclipse occurred in your second solar house. This is where your traditional ruler Saturn continues to reside. But that was very close to the shimmering energies of Neptune. Since 2012, your generosity and compassion have been heightened by Neptune, but at times it may have made it more difficult to really be firmer around your boundaries, particularly around everyday finances. So as you go into this month, that lunar eclipse feeds into the solar eclipse, which occurs across the 2nd and 3rd of October. They're from different series, but we still need to, in some ways, weave them together. So that sensitive second house energy, money, self-worth, values, against the more expansive energies of the solar eclipse. So if you come into this new month, or even over the next 6 months, the period of influence of the eclipses, being a bit free and easy with your resources, because you're in the mood to break out, perhaps be a little bit more rebellious, that might not necessarily be to your best benefit. So it's just important to use the knowledge that the solar eclipse can bestow on you, and to gain greater understanding of key strands in your situation to make as informed decisions as possible around finance. So that's the main way to weave those two eclipses together. But at the start of this month, your traditional ruler Saturn is influential still. It's in an opposition with the moon. The moon in the 8th house can be very psychological. There may be times this month, therefore, that what you learn could be very much to do with your inner world and your evolution in terms of your personal understanding. But because the 8th house can be about shared resources, Saturn's in the 2nd house, is there some tension that's set to shape up about how money is used or spent in a close alliance? It's possible. But equally, the 9th house can be very much about liberation. So that solar eclipse could see you want to break free of an arrangement which doesn't work for you any longer. So that could be, for example, someone you work for that you don't feel remunerated enough in the role, or you don't feel appreciated enough, because that's that self-worth energy of the lunar eclipse. It doesn't just have to be about money. But you know, if you do want to make progress professionally, Venus, the planet of charm, is right at the top of your scope as you come into this month, and actually aligns brilliantly with Saturn by the end of the first week. So your ability to cultivate important contacts could lead to something really substantive in terms of a contract. So that 9th house solar eclipse definitely has opportunities. The lunar eclipse is just presenting the potential for some details to be a bit hazy because of Neptune. So that's where it's very important to use the precision of Mercury for its rulership of Virgo in the solar eclipse and from the consimi to drill down into the details. It will help to protect you. But on the 9th of this month, Jupiter, the planet of fortune, does slam on the celestial brakes, as it does each year for 4 months. Won't go direct until the start of February next year. And it's in the part of your situation to do with speculation, but also fun, sociability, romance. If you have children, their activities are also brought to the fore by Jupiter in the 5th house since the end of May. Does it mean that you're going to be unlucky through till early February next year? No. Because Jupiter actually forges, despite the retrograde, a stunning alliance to the Sun right at the heart of this month. And it could be that something that you do try that is showing a fresh approach, that's more enterprising, could play out for you brilliantly well, because Jupiter can be in some ways about trade. So if you work for yourself, you've got a new idea, or you're developing a new strand in an existing business that you work within, it could create a lot of excitement. What Jupiter retrograde really asks us to do is dive deep down into situations and look at the more philosophical and faith-based side of things, rather than the more happy-go-lucky, playful, and perhaps living in the moment energy of Jupiter direct in the 5th house. But on the 12th, Pluto, which had been in your sign from the 21st of January to the 2nd of September, ends the retrograde, which began on the 11th of May. The great news about this is that you've got one small window to now go through to the 19th of November, and Pluto comes back to your sign. Now, if you check out Capricornians, they will tell you, many of them, that since 2008, Pluto's caused mischief. But Pluto is about transitions, and it's also about consequences and outcomes. And the 1st house is where we start a process off. So the 12th house energy that Pluto's in is about something ending, but something over a very long period of time. It could also be that if you're a bit more of a detached type of Aquarius and a bit more logical, that Pluto, through its transition since 2008, in Capricorn, it's been pushing you to become much more mindful of your deeper motivations, but of those of others. But there may have been some painful endings. That I'm not downplaying that. I'm just saying that when Pluto moves back to Aquarius, it is an opportunity to recast things in the here and now, particularly around your identity, your thinking, your creativity. And this last pass through the 12th house is at least not in retrograde, so it's a chance to really tie up lots of outstanding loose ends. But on the 13th, Mercury climbs high in the sky, joining with Venus initially in your 10th house. A great opportunity to learn new skills professionally, perhaps even to think about travel linked to your work, because the energy of the solar eclipse and the sun still powerful in the sign of Libra, the 9th house of expansion. But Mercury does clash with Pluto. If there is a point of view, particularly around a professional relationship, that isn't necessarily aligning with someone you need to work with, it could be a tender moment. You may have to decide, do you want to comply with the expectation, or do you want to stay strictly with what works for you? You can do that if you're a natural bohemian, but you might miss out on a big opportunity. So there could be a judgment call at that part of the month. But on the 17th, Venus moves into your sector of truth, and that actually can be an opportunity to travel, to talk to someone who's exciting, different, perhaps from a different background to you. But also, on the same day, we have the full moon. But it's a full moon that's powered up by a lot of passion. It's in the sign of Aries, which of course is a fire sign. But the 3rd house energy is about quick communication. The position of the sun, the 9th house, is about our higher thoughts, philosophies, the rule of law, and so forth. So it can create an electric energy around communications. But intersecting these two positions is Mars. And Mars, from the start of this month to the end, is in your 6th house, which can make you a bit more sacrificing, very hard working, and give you extra endurance and stamina. It's going to be in Cancer through to the 4th of November, back again from the 6th of January through to the 18th of April. So if you are wanting to get even fitter or stronger or more robust to deal with life's demands, Mars certainly helps. Also helps you if you're wanting to really thrust into a job and invest a lot of energy and dedication into it. But what happens here on this full moon is that Mars creates a spark with the sign it rules of Aries, but also it's squaring up to the sun, which is a bit weak in the sign of Libra. It's known as being in its full, and Mars itself is in full in the sign of Cancer. So we have the potential for some irritations, Mars in the 6th house, to actually creep into some strident conversations that could occur. Now, in some ways, maybe it's good that you could, if you choose to, really front up some of the frustrations you have. But you just need to be sure that you use the energy wisely. It's potentially a bit of a tinderbox, that particular full moon. But Venus moving into Sagittarius, Venus of course can be about charm and diplomacy, Sagittarius travel, expansion, individuality, independence, and Venus here can be quite sweet, but then on the 22nd, the Sun climbs to the top of your chart. Ambitions are going to be very important over the following 4 weeks, but it, like Mercury, clashes with Pluto. Once more, there could be a judgment call. But if you are really wanting to reach for the stars, raise your profile and be much more driven in terms of ambitions and goals, this shift of the Sun will help. Now Venus then runs into some heavy weather, clashing with Saturn towards the end of the month. Saturn in your sector of money, self-worth, values, against Venus in the part of your chart to do with higher truths. Are you realizing that someone will never really align with your values? It's possible, but also as the month comes to a close, Mars and Pluto, the two rulers of Scorpio, which themselves are very intense energies. Mars can be confrontational, Pluto can be about the deeper machinations, it can be about power, the things we don't necessarily see. So in your 12th house, it is possible that something around your work could come into the open, and maybe there are people that you're needing to collaborate with who perhaps are a little sneaky, not necessarily got your best interests at heart. Watch out for some office politics as this month comes to a close. Now, because of your nature, you can be quite idealistic, but the Sun and Mercury high in the sky could see you wanting to be a little bit more worldly orientated towards the end of this month. So anticipate who it is might be up to skullduggery, and if you do, that means you can anticipate it and prepare accordingly. But there may be some deep-rooted issues that do come up to the surface as this month draws to a close. So to recap, Aquarius, a glorious opportunity over the next 6 months and through the first 2/3 of this month to travel, expand your horizons, be a bit more spontaneous, try to develop that part of you that loves independence and freedom. But equally, there could be opportunities for some kind of new professional contract, but at the same time those responsibilities could in some ways create something of a dilemma for you. There may be some office politics towards the end of this month, but use the position of Mercury to check out the detail of whatever you're considering, and that will help you to negotiate those 2 eclipses, not just this month, but through the next half year. All the best, have a great October, and do please check out that year 2025 personal horoscope forecast offer. You'll get the rest of this year free, but also 30% off with your life roadmap report, all based totally on your unique birth data, and great value too. Please see the link below for more. Welcome Pisces to your in-depth monthly horoscope for October 2024 for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. Please do take advantage of your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data. If you order it now, you can get the rest of year 2024 free, plus your life roadmap report and 30% off. On the screen now, I'm showing your event chart right at the start of the month, which will prove influential. The big takeout is that as September came to a close, we had a Mercury cazimi. That's where the Sun and Mercury are in total unison. The Sun amplifies the energy of Mercury, which is about communication through its rulership of Gemini and precision through its rulership of Virgo. But for you, they're clustered together at the start of this month in house 8, and that's very much getting beneath the surface of situations, really drilling down and understanding the more psychological influences, but anything to do with life's transitions and changes. So if you're evolving in a big way, this month is going to be key, but also Pisces, the next 6 months too, because the solar eclipse across the 2nd and 3rd of October is rich with potential. If you're an entrepreneurial fish, this is your chance to shine. What's not to like? Well, it's just as you start this month, the moon's in a very positive location for you in your 7th house, which gives you the opportunity to find points of interest with others, points of agreement, but it is broadly opposed by Saturn in your sign. So you might have to push yourself at times to connect with others. But what's going to help you this month is the wonderful energies of Mars. Mars is the planet of passion, the planet of identity in some ways, but also about instant gratification through its rulership of Scorpio. And it's in your 5th house, your sister water sign of Cancer. And it's going to be very influential through this month, through to the 4th of November, and then again in the early part of next year, which could be very positive in terms of your creative output, but also potentially romantically too. But Mars is going to apply in 2 very potent ways later this month to 2 big events, which I'll share with you as we go on. But also at the start of this month, we need to be mindful of the lunar eclipse which occurred in your sign across the 17th and 18th of September, because the shimmering mesmeric energies of Neptune was very close to that. But the 1st house and the energies from it is very much about your individuality. The 8th house is where we're more invested in others, perhaps financially, perhaps emotionally. Can be the sector of devotion if a relationship's going very well. But the 1st house is asking you through that lunar eclipse to stay in touch with what you need as an individual, and to make sure you get the tip point between what you need and where you're going to invest and connect is not necessarily an easy thing to align. And that's going to be a pattern for you over the next 6 months. What can help you at the start of this month, however, is that Venus is in a glorious location. Venus isn't just about relationships, can be about charm, aesthetics, but also money. But in the 9th house, it points towards some kind of adventure, or the potential for an adventure, or connecting to someone who's a little bit different, particularly at the heart of this month. But by the end of the 1st week, she does connect with Saturn in your sign. So although Saturn is a bit inhibiting of the moon at the start of the month, you get an opportunity, if you are linking with people that you feel there's a good rapport with, there's a respect, perhaps you share interests, maybe culturally, maybe philosophically, maybe to do with enjoying things like bands, exhibitions, and so forth. Those areas are all strengthened through the 1st week of this month. But what about your traditional ruler Jupiter? It goes into a retrograde each year for 4 months. That starts on the 9th of this month. But it also occurs for you in the part of your situation to do with how you feel about things. Now, because you're a water sign, your senses can often be very heightened, but shaping that into something that's more, that's clearer to you can sometimes prove a little elusive. But what this Jupiter retrograde gives you the chance to do is actually dive down deep into your needs, but particularly around where you live, who you live with and how, and anything to do with your family life, because there could be some growth there, but it may come from what you discover deep within you. But for some Pisces people, this could be a time when you do consider moving, and Jupiter still forges, despite the retrograde, a sparkling alliance to the Sun, which reaches a peak on the 14th. If you have been waiting to hear about a financial outcome or something to do with a property matter, good news can bless you despite that Jupiter retrograde. But on the 12th, Pluto, which has been retracing its steps through your sector of friendship and future directions from the 2nd of September, goes direct. If since the 2nd of September through to the middle of this month, some people make way in terms of your friendship circle, wouldn't be a surprise. Pluto is about transitions, but it's also about consequences. Since 2008, you may have got to know quite a few different types of people, but not all of those players will still be in your life now. The people that are from now through to the 19th of November are likely to be in your life for your life. However, also at the heart of this month, we do have a very electric and exciting opposition between Venus and also Uranus. A completely spontaneous conversation that you have, it may be online, it could be in the most mundane of situations where you start chatting to someone. It could just be that you hold the door open, turn around, and someone has an energy about them that is just so enticing, but also you can also quickly start talking, and maybe it's a bit of a tease, some jousting, but very exciting. That's possible at the heart of this month too. And then Mercury moves from the deep, rather subterranean energies of the sign of Libra for you, and into the part of your situation, the sign of Scorpio, which is much more to do with opening up your world. Join in with Venus initially, but that's intersected by, on the 17th, the full moon, and this is where Mars starts to show its might. The full moon occurs in your sector of everyday money. The sun's in the part of your scope to do with shared resources, long-term financial planning, anything to do with pensions, savings, investments, entrepreneurship. But Mars intersects the two of them in the part of your scope to do with speculation. If you're tempted on this full moon to do something quite suddenly with your resources, do be aware that there could be a consequence for that. It doesn't mean to say it won't work out, but Mars can be so impulsive, and because it's the ruler of the sign of Aries where the moon is, that in itself is quite an impulsive place for the moon to be. So it's important that if you do make quite a quick decision, you're aware that that decision may play out not quite as you expect. But then again, you could find yourself attracted to someone. Maybe it's that person you've had that flirtatious conversation with, that suddenly the electric sexual energy between you is really turned up to max. Now, if that's not what you're looking for in your situation, just be aware that you could feel the need to splurge, to buy something that just seems so enticing, and it may be very hard to resist. On the 17th, however, Venus moves into the part of your chart that's to do with success. If you are someone who needs to cultivate a particular image in your work or your career, Venus's svelte energies here can be very helpful to you. But Venus is then challenged in the last week of this month by Saturn in your sign. You may find that despite your pleasantries and the care you take over building some kind of relationship, particularly with someone who can be an influencer, that suddenly the door may seem to close quite firmly shut, which could be quite bruising. Just be aware the Sun moves to join with Mercury in your sister water sign of Scorpio on the 22nd, but it too clashes with Pluto. I think it's possible that some piece of information or a perspective can come up about a friendship and helps you to see things in a slightly different way. It may be a bit disappointing, but at least you'll know where you stand. But then the second of the very powerful events that feature Mars. Mars goes face to face with Pluto. This is one of astrology's most strident influences. It can give people huge willpower. Mars in the 5th house can be about romance, desire, passion, play, sociability, impulsiveness. Pluto in the 11th house is asking you to think about how your future will play out. And because they're going face to face, it is kind of like a very big standoff, which can create a lot of tension if you're interacting with someone who's equally as strong-willed as you, and you both don't want to budge on a point of view. But it can work in a very constructive way, that it can give you the furnace of energy to work towards a longer term aspiration, because the 11th house is not so much about a goal, it's more about something that has a spiritual dimension to your desire to go for it. Can really be fantastically strong as this month comes to a close. So to recap, a time of transitions, balancing where you're invested with a need to maintain your individuality is important from the eclipses. Jupiter retrograde doesn't need to be unlucky, but it could see you thinking about where you live, how you live there. If you're trying to move, it could all fall into place at the middle of this month. A very sparkling encounter is possible at the heart of this month, but also perhaps some feist in an existing relationship. It won't be dull. The chance to widen your horizons and travel towards the end of this month. But if you're feeling impulsive around resources, make sure that you can afford to enjoy that moment and not have a classic case of buyer's remorse. But then towards the end of the month, there is that titanic opposition between Mars and Pluto, which certainly will create some dramatic excitement for us all. Have a great month. And do please check out that year 2025 personal horoscope forecast offer. You'll get the rest of this year free, but also 30% off with your life roadmap report, all based totally on your unique birth data and great value too. Please see the link below for more.